Okay. Right. Our next speaker today is Mr. Jesse Elzinga. Jesse is headmaster of Sevenoaks School. Sevenoaks, I'm sure many of you will know, is a co-ed boarding school where they teach the IB. It is regularly amongst, if not the #1 boarding IB school in the UK. Now, Jesse, before he joined as headmaster of Sevenoaks in 2020, he held the headship at Reading Bluecoat School, and before that was director of studies at Harrow. Now, I've had to curtail Jesse's CV a little bit. It is very, very impressive indeed. So I picked out the highlights. Jesse studied at Harvard University, where he gained a BA honours in comparative religion and philosophy, and at Oxford University, where his MSc focused on ethical philosophy. Jesse was a 3-time national champion rower at Harvard and Oxford, and then became a competitive cyclist, twice racing against Sir Bradley Wiggins at the British Time Trial Championships. So Jesse is at pains to point out that Sir Bradley won by a significant margin on both occasions. Jesse is also an Ironman triathlete and marathoner, and since moving to Sevenoaks, can be spotted in the early morning running in the old park. Jesse will be talking to us about the benefits of a boarding school education before, during, and after COVID-19. Jesse, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning here from London, and good evening to all of you in Hong Kong. I hope that you're all safe and well in these strange times, and thank you for that a very generous introduction. I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself, because sometimes people like to know about the headmaster, and then we'll get into talking about what I think are the benefits of boarding through this strange time and going forward. So you may have noticed by my accent that I'm not originally from England. I grew up in the States, and I'm a dual citizen, and hence why I had the opportunity to study at both in the US and the UK, but I've been a teacher here for 20 years at several different schools. It's a great privilege now to be the headmaster of Sevenoaks School. This is my first year as headmaster. I moved to Sevenoaks in the course of last summer. I've been a headmaster before in another school, but it's my first year headmaster here at Sevenoaks, and it's a great privilege to be here. In case you don't know, we are just a few basics about Sevenoaks. We are fully co-educational, so fully co-educational, 50-50 boys and girls throughout the school. And we have students here from the ages of 11 to 18. And then we have boarders here from the ages of 13 to 18. We have a large boarding community where we have 400 students who are boarders and over 8 different boarding houses. And then we have 800 day students as well. So we have 1,200 students in total, but a third of those are boarders. And 400 is a really big boarding community. As you're probably aware, that's larger than some whole boarding schools. Another unique thing about us, besides being co-ed and having a significant boarding program, is, as was mentioned in the introduction, we teach the IB diploma here. We do not do A-levels in the 6th form. We do GCSE and IGCSEs at year 11, and then all of our students take the IB diploma. And we are one of the top IB diploma schools in the world. It's a wonderful qualification, and I'll come back and talk a bit more about that later on. Now, I wanted to kind of talk about boarding, and I'll obviously talk about boarding through the pandemic, and that was the title I was given. And it's fair to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought challenges to all of us around the world. And of course, the education sector has been severely affected. It's been particularly hard for the students. People often say to me, oh, how difficult it must be to take over as a head in the midst of a pandemic. But really, I always think about the students, they're which come first. It was interesting before the pandemic. I don't know if you picked this up in Hong Kong, but sometimes older people describe today's youth as being soft or not being that resilient. Sometimes there's a phrase that's thrown around in the press here sometimes talking about a snowflake generation, the snowflake being a delicate generation who's not encountered difficulty or resilience. And my sincere hope now is that this phrase will no longer be used about young people today. Like all of us, the students, the young people today have had to adapt and show extraordinary resilience in the pandemic. And I do think there will be great strengths going forward from that. They'll be more resilient, more adaptable, more determined, and also I think have a greater appreciation for every opportunity that they have in life and not take things for granted. Now, as you can imagine, COVID-19 pandemic demanded quite a bit of our institution, and we revised our practice here very quickly and effectively, and I'm delighted with how we responded. In a matter of days in March 2020, when we went into our first national lockdown here in the UK, we moved our timetable online, and our students continued to benefit from the structure of the school day, including live content in every lesson. We didn't have a full day of live lessons because we thought that was too exhausting for students, but we did have them follow the timetable of the day, and aspects of every lesson were live, and then they had the normal breaks as they would during the school day. And overall, the students at Sevenoaks made excellent progress. And even though public exams, both the IB and GCSE and IGCSE, were cancelled this summer and last summer, I'm confident that our students would have performed extremely well if they'd sat those exams, given how well their academic education continued. I'm really proud to say here too that we've avoided any outbreak. We've hardly had any infections in our school community, and we've never had a large outbreak that meant we had to close down a boarding house or close the school. Now, I recognize this is partly due to good fortune, but I'm also confident this is linked to many of the precautions that we put in place. For example, in September 2020, when we reopened after the first lockdown, we tested all students and staff before they returned to the campus. So everyone was tested. And at that point in the pandemic, testing was quite hard to come by, but we engaged a private company who did that. And that helped to ensure that we did not have an outbreak of cases as we had students coming back to school and boarders coming from around the world. Now, as you may be aware, the UK introduced that mass testing for schools only in March of 2021. So we were 7 months ahead of the curve in doing that for ourselves. And now we use the UK government testing scheme, and everyone in my school community is tested twice a week. But we did that from the very beginning, from September. Also in September, my very first month as headmaster, I bought 2 PCR testing machines from the University of Cambridge, which were fully authorized, and the same device used by the National Health Service here in our hospitals. I did make sure I wasn't taking test machines away from the hospitals, but these were surplus ones I was able to buy from Cambridge. And again, at that point in the pandemic, access to testing was very limited, but to have our own testing machines here meant that anyone who displayed any symptoms, we could test very quickly and isolate them if necessary. It also meant that if anyone, often there are students going around who have colds and flus, it meant if someone had a slight temperature, actually we could do a proper test on them and know if we could allow them to go back into the school community or if they have to isolate. And I'll never forget in that, after I bought those machines, it was quite expensive to do. I bought those machines, a student stopped me and said, "Sir, last week someone in my house had a temperature and we all had to isolate for 5 days while we waited for negative test results. Last week, today I only had to isolate for 45 minutes while you were doing the test. So thank you so much for buying those machines." And it just meant we were able to keep the school going. Of course, as you'd expect, we have an enhanced cleaning regime with regular cleaners rotating around the school day and night with deep cleans. We still have enhanced cleaning at the moment. And of course, we did everything you might expect with face coverings, regular hand washing, physical distancing, ventilation. So in many ways, I think we were exemplary in our response and an example of best practice. And to make it all the way through the pandemic with no outbreak and not have to send any students home has been great. And I know that students, parents and staff were all particularly delighted when we got to the end of the autumn term, despite the challenges faced by other schools. And as you're probably aware, the vaccination program in the UK is a great success now. And as I'm speaking today, 70% of the UK adult population has had at least one dose of the vaccine, myself included in that. I got my first dose earlier this month. And now that normal education has resumed and the vaccination rate is very high in the UK and going very quickly, I hope that we won't have another outbreak. So that's just a little bit about how we as a boarding school adapted through COVID. And I should also add that we kept boarding houses open throughout the year. So normally students might fly home at holidays or at half term, but for some of our boarders, given the travel restrictions, it was difficult for them to go home. So we allowed them to stay here throughout the holidays. And so some of our boarders were here for longer than they might have liked, not being able to go home, but we offered that flexibility too, which I know was appreciated by many of our parents. Now, let me talk about kind of the benefits. That's kind of how we did really well, I think, as a boarding school during COVID-19. But let me talk a little bit about moving forward, why I think boarding education is so important. I was asked in the midst of the pandemic, and during one of the lockdowns, are there great things you're going to learn and you're going to take forward from this? And yes, we bolstered our IT infrastructure, and all our staff and students are even more adept at IT than they were. But I think what I really felt through the pandemic is that online education wasn't going to be the way forward. And we were all desperate to start doing things in real life again. And I'm so pleased now that all of our students are back, and just to hear the joy of the students walking around the campus every day is fantastic. And now Sevenoaks School, we're known as one of the top academic schools in the UK, and our academic results and the university destinations of our leavers, we proudly publish on our website. So if you go to Sevenoaks School and you look up the university destinations, it's an amazing list of We're fully transparent of that because we're so proud of it. But the education of Sevenoaks is about so much more than just those exam results and where the students go off to. We offer a holistic, broad education that includes opportunities for young people in music, drama, sport, the cadet force, outdoor expeditions, trips in the UK and around the world. As restrictions ease, we'll start doing that again. And we also have a diverse program of service and partnership work that involves our students volunteering in local schools and care homes and with charities. And these co-curricular opportunities are so important for the development of young people. It's often through these pursuits that they develop their soft skills and their character, and they develop the important traits that ensure they're successful in life. And you just can't do that to the same extent when the students aren't here in real life. Now, these soft skills, developing someone's character, these aren't things that can be put in league tables or exam results, but we all know what these things are because you recognize them in interview and employers value them. So by soft skills, I mean communication skills, resilience, determination, patience, creativity, adaptability, the ability to work with a team, to be a team player. And it's often through co-curricular activities that students learn these skills and develop their leadership qualities. And for so many young people, when they have success in co-curricular things, that helps develop their self-confidence, their identity, their self-esteem. And if they can discover these passions and gain confidence outside the classroom, this often translates back into the classroom and helps them make even better progress. So we run so many different clubs, activities, and societies as we never know where a student might develop their passion. For some, it might be debating. For some, it might be rock climbing. For others, it's chess. For others, it's Model United Nations or going on hikes. Now, in the course of the pandemic, we adapted our co-curricular program and many things went online and we were still able to do many things. However, it was clear that it's much easier to maintain academic momentum virtually, where it's more difficult to offer the usual aspects of co-curricular online. For example, playing in an orchestra in person or singing in choir is a really unique experience. And team sports with fixtures against other schools, some of these things can only really happen in person. So for me, people have talked about lessons learned from the pandemic and opportunities there might be for the future. And there's no doubt that our staff and students are great with IT and we all can use these Zoom mechanisms better. However, I think it's all made us become more wary of screen time and appreciate doing things in real life. So I'm so delighted that in the UK since March, after the second closure of schools, we've been able to reopen properly here. I know that lockdown and school closures have been hard on students, parents, and their families, and I'm so pleased and impressed with how our students and teachers have adapted despite that lack of authentic human interaction. But I think it's worth saying well done to all of you, to students, parents, and schools around the world for all the work they did to get through the past year. And I think it is, as the school has reopened, what's been so wonderful is just having the students back here in person. And I think I'm describing it as that joy of existence. And I've said to the students as they come back, you know, make the most of every opportunity, just appreciate every day, because we all know how painful lockdown and the pandemic has been. So appreciate every day and make the most of all the opportunities here. Because it's only when young people are here on campus, surrounded by their peers, working in real life, that they're able to develop fully all aspects of their personality and benefit from the breadth of education that schools like us have to offer. So for boarders to come here and experience the rich holistic education of a school like Sevenoaks, it's really unique. So I'm gonna stop there. Yes, that someone just said joy of existence. They like that, but I do think I do think that's been the problem of the pandemic. Is even for me as a headmaster, it's taken a lot of the joy out of the job because I'm not able to interact with the students and they're not able to interact with each other. And it's just great to have that joy back. So I'm going to stop there. I'm a big believer in Q&A, and Sir Michael Wilshaw, who's the former Chief Inspector of Schools in the UK, he said that when you meet a head from a school, ask them difficult questions, give them a really hard time. So I invite you all now, all the attendees, to think about questions that you might want to ask me, and do give me a hard time, do push me. And I'm in particular, I think it might be helpful to talk more to some of you about the IB diploma, because that's something we know very well, but do ask anything about pastoral care, about co-curricular life in the school.
Great. Well, Jesse, thank you very, very much indeed for that. Very, very interesting. And yes, well, I'll ask the questions as they come in. So let's start with that one, the inevitable one, which has come from Shanghai Why should my kid choose IB over A-level or even AP? Does IB have an edge at applying for universities?
Yes, I'll be quite bold and I'll say that the IB diploma is the best education in the world for 16 to 18-year-olds. And I'm very passionate about the IB. I introduced it at 2 schools before I came to Sevenoaks, and it's great to be here at a school that's one of the leading IB schools in the world. And the key reason why I'm such a big fan of the IB diploma is the breadth of education. When students are 15 or 16 years old, it's too young for them to give up a core subject. I think it's a mistake for a student to say, you know what, at 16 years old, I'm just going to do maths and sciences, or I'm just going to do foreign languages and not do maths and sciences anymore, or it's too young to make those decisions. If you do the IB diploma, everyone studies maths, everyone does a science, and you can do more than one science if that's what your particular strength is. Everyone studies English, everyone has to do a modern foreign language, and then you have a choice of arts and humanities. In the IB, so you study 6 subjects, and 3 of them you do at higher level. And studying a subject at higher level in the IB is the same as doing it at A level or AP in terms of the content that you would cover and how prepared you'd be. So you still specialize in 3 subjects, but then you have that breadth of the rounded of the 6 subjects. And in addition to the 6 subjects, there's a critical thinking course called Theory of Knowledge and an extended essay. I know the gentleman from Abingdon was talking about the extended project qualification, which is the A-level equivalent of that, but A-level actually borrowed that from the IB. They adapted from the IB. The extended essay's been there. Now, I'm influenced partly by my own education at Harvard, which is a liberal arts education. And although you focus in one course there, and I did, you also study for 4 years because you study a range of things. So although my degree was in philosophy and religion, I read every Shakespeare play as part of my undergraduate experience. I studied jazz music, and I can walk into a restaurant now and say, that's Mood Indigo by Duke Ellington. And I have all this wealth of jazz knowledge because that was part of my course. I studied Spanish throughout my university times, and I have that. So you develop all these different strengths. And I believe that a well-educated person is someone who's a well-rounded person. It's actually a former president of Harvard University who said, a well-educated person knows a little bit of everything and something well. So one of the things I don't like about England, and it was weird moving here, was when you just meet people and they say, oh, I'm rubbish at maths. I stopped doing it when I was 15. Or I'm rubbish at French, or I'm no good at English. I can't. And I don't accept that. Anyone can develop in any subject and keep going. So, and the reality is the workplace and the real world is interdisciplinary. Scientists need good communication skills, and it's valuable for those who study humanities to be numerate. I'm now effectively the CEO of a business that has a £40 million turnover. That's my job. And I need to know a lot about numbers and maths. I can't just say I'm rubbish at it. So the IB diploma, it was a little bit of history. It was developed in an international school in Geneva in the 1960s. Some internationally minded educators wanted to develop from scratch the best possible education for sixth formers. And it was funded by 2 grants from UNESCO and the United Nations. So people from New York were involved, and also the College Board in America, that college board that runs SATs and ACTs, they were involved in it. There was also input from the University of Oxford, the director of education there, and together they developed this common curriculum, these 6 subjects and the core, in an examination system that ensured students were well prepared for the top universities in the world, particularly in Europe and the US. And the IB now is more than 50 years old. We've been teaching it more than 40 years at Sevenoaks, and it's hardly changed. It's entirely independent of government interference, and it's changed very little over the last 50 years because it was developed on first principles. And here, you may be aware in the UK, we constantly have changes with GCSEs and A levels, and depending on who's in government, and the IB is just immune from all that. So that's my hard sell. That's what I think about the IB. And the final thing I will just say at this point is part of the reason I'm at Sevenoaks is that I have 3 children myself. And I want them all to do the IB because I know it's the best education in the world. And that's part of the reason I'm here too. So I'm practicing what I preach as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jesse. That's, I suppose, what we would have expected. Specifically with regards to does IB have an edge at applying for universities? I suppose we talk about different universities, but do you believe it gives you a competitive advantage? And does it depend on where the universities are?
My honest answer to that is that the top universities want the top students, and I think they will, in certain places, like, yeah, so if you're applying to a university in the United States, I think the IB is an advantage because you will have the breadth of education you need, which will make you better prepared for the liberal arts education. So it can be an advantage, I think, if you're going to the States. But if you're applying to a university in the UK here, you still have the higher level subjects in the focus. And obviously UK universities, you normally just apply and study one subject. I know that, well, the statistic right now is about 30% of students at UK universities are from overseas. So the universities here are used to seeing qualifications from around the world. I think you mentioned AP, exams, advanced placement, that mostly happens in the States, A-level, IB. They're used to seeing all these qualifications. They know what top marks look like, and they try to find the top students. So whilst I think the IB is a great education for young people, I don't think it necessarily gives them an advantage, because some of the brightest people in the world might be at other schools not doing the IB, and the universities still want those. And again, in America, with the reason they have these SAT and ACT tests, these are effectively IQ tests. They're just trying to find the brightest people out there. So I think the IB is great preparation for university. I think it's great preparation for careers and wider in life. But I wouldn't go so far as to say it gives a distinct advantage over students studying other qualifications.
All right, thank you very much, Jesse. Another question here from Shanghai. How would you describe a typical Sevenoaks student, or what kind of impression do you think Sevenoaks students will give to people on first sight? First sight, perhaps.
Well, I think. Let me answer that with pulling up something that we just did in the past month. One of my head of sixth form here is doing a master's degree whilst he's teaching, and he's looking at values in the school. And he did a survey of 87 staff members, and these were the top 10 words they used to describe Sevenoaks. So we've just done this in a survey, and the first one was academic, then excellence, kindness, tolerance, international, open-minded, respectful, service-oriented, and liberal. So I think that kind of gives you a description of the sense of here. We are a place that, and academic and excellence were kind of the first two, but then the next two words that were used just as much by staff to describe students were tolerant and kind. And we also have quite a unique international community here because of the IB diploma. We're so well known. We have students from 46 different countries. And we even some of our local day market, we attract families who have a diverse background. It might be the mothers from France and the fathers from Hungary, or the fathers from Brazil and the mothers from Hong Kong. And we have these really unique, diverse families around here that makes it particularly attractive. So I think that's what makes Sevenoaks a little bit unique. Is yes, there's the academic side, but then students are kind, they're tolerant, they're respectful, and they're globally minded. They have a wider perspective.
Great, thanks very much, Jesse. Now, next question has come in also from Shanghai, actually. Now, this is obviously very much related to what you've been talking about, but any opinions on the COVID situation going on? How would that affect international students, especially Asian students, who plan to study in the school maybe next year? I know this was quite broad, and a lot of that's been covered, but perhaps, what kind of reassurances can you give to people that they will be able to start school? I'm not asking you to comment as the World Health Organization, but what kind of reassurances can you give to people who are still sort of a little nervous about that?
I think what I would say is, look, I think international travel restrictions might be around for a while still, and the scientists I'm listening to keep emphasizing, yes, it's great that the vaccination program is a big success in places like the UK, but what we really need is global vaccination, and we've got to get the whole planet vaccinated, and so there aren't other variants, and so we don't have to keep closing down borders. I think what I'd say to reassure families thinking about boarding for next year in the UK is speak to the school you're interested in going to. So here at Sevenoaks, we've opened our boarding houses well in advance of term, so students can actually come, and if they do need to quarantine, well, right now you could do the 5 days and then test and release, but you can do that here at school. We will welcome you into the school and before term starts, and you can spend time here. And if it's too difficult to travel back to Hong Kong at half term, that's okay. You can stay here. And we're being flexible in that sense. It's not that we in normal times we would tell the students at half term you have to go home, we have to close, let's give everyone a break. But it's not normal times. So I think that's what I would say is that, and I know many other boarding schools are being flexible and adapting in that way. So and I think so. Yes, you might have to send your son or daughter to the UK slightly longer than you would have otherwise. You might, for example, you might send them for a whole term rather than thinking they're going to come home at half term. But we'll be flexible and accommodating with that.
Okay, thank you very much. So your message perhaps to families who are wavering about registering would be go ahead and you know.
I was worried, you know, when this pandemic hit a year ago, I said to my governors, I don't know if borders will come back, if the travel restrictions are too difficult. And then what was amazing to me is all of our borders did come back. And some of them had to quarantine for 2 weeks. It's gotten better now with the test and release scheme. You just have to quarantine for 5 days if you have a negative test. But the borders all came back and they quarantined for 2 weeks. And I think what it demonstrated to me is just how much our families value the education here. That they are, once they've chosen Sevenoaks and they're coming to this UK boarding experience, they are committed to it. And they were willing to go through more obstacles than existed before COVID. And it was really flattering and reassuring on the one hand, but really flattering. And it made me more determined to be flexible and accommodating, as I mentioned, with the provision that we had to make it as easy as that. And as I said, we've got our own testing machines here, so we arrange for students to have tests they need before they travel. And we've just been as helpful as we possibly can be. And I've gotten some lovely feedback from boarders and their families, and they want to be here, so we're trying to make it easy for them.
And this question is a little bit more specific, has come from Sophie. What kind of clubs does the school have? Now that's also a very big topic, and you touched on that. Does the school have any clubs related to computer science? That's a challenge, your knowledge of of everything you have to offer.
Yeah, we have dozens of clubs, and you can do anything that you want here. And if you're particularly interested in computer science or coding, then we'll support you doing that as well. One of the coolest things that happened this summer term was our students, their IB exams were canceled, but our upper six students, they still came back into school. And we had all sorts of academic enrichment and projects for them. And one of the coolest ones was they put together a weather balloon. And these were a bunch of my physicists, and it involved plenty of coding and programming. And they put together a weather balloon that had a camera and a tracking device, and they launched the balloon, and it got up to 23 kilometers high, vertical. And they had a camera on it. So as it went up from the school, we had these amazing aerial views of the school, and then it looked. Now, I've checked this out, and they weren't actually out of the atmosphere. They weren't in space, but gosh, it looked like it. They were up above clouds and above where jumbo jets were flying with this balloon. And then we actually tracked it when it got it. So we have all sorts of cool clubs and activities, and students doing extension work just beyond the normal syllabus, and absolutely come and do some coding and programming and computer science.
Thanks, Jess. And finally, again, I think the question that we will always have, what are Sevenoaks looking for in their applicants? I think that's probably referring to year 9. And do you have your own prep school? That was all one question there. I think I know the answer to the second part.
We don't have our own prep school here. So we start at year 7, but year 7 and 8 is just day students. And then boarders come at year 9. So we have an entry at year 7 for local day students. That's about 80 students join us. And then 100 students join us at year 9. And then we also have a large entry at the 6th form, and we have 2 boarding houses. 2 of our 8 boarding houses are 6th form only boarding houses, because many students will come here just to do the IB and the 6th form. So we don't have our own prep school. And then the question, what are we looking for? Of course, we want students who are academically ambitious and bright and determined in the academic sphere. But we can easily fill the school with just really bright students and test results. And our missions is much more nuanced than that. We look very closely at references, And we also interview every candidate here, even boarders, and we also arrange group interviews for them, because we want to see, do they interact with each other? Are they kind? Are they tolerant? Are they open-minded? Are they respectful? Are they intellectually curious and creative? And will they come and make the most of all that Sevenoaks has to offer, but also contribute here and make valuable contributions to the school? So it's not just about the academics. We are looking at the whole person.
Thank you very much. And I think final question, Jesse. Will I have my own bedroom if I come to Sevenoaks? I think that's probably the standard for everywhere, but please do.
No, we do not have single rooms for every student. Most of the students share throughout their school experience. So a standard room, when you arrive in the younger years, you might have 2 or 3 students in a room, and you each have your own bed, obviously, and your own desk and your own kind of corner in the room, but they share rooms. And most of our students really like that. One of the great things about coming, I sometimes say, I went to summer camp growing up. I went to kind of American summer camps that were just where you stay in cabins and you do activities with friends all day. And sometimes I think going to boarding school is just like going to one big long summer camp and you with all of your best friends, and that the students here really enjoy it. So they don't have, the exception to that is the students all do have their own room in the final year in the upper 6th. So you share and you have roommates throughout. And then in the upper 6th year, that's such a busy year and so important for university applications and for finishing off the IB diploma, which is a rigorous qualification. We want them to have a quiet study space in their own room and not have it. So yes, at the end, but beforehand, you'll have great fun meeting good friends.
Great, okay. Jesse, well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time today. Very interesting speech. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great, thanks so much. Goodbye, everyone. For now, I hope to have the opportunity to welcome you at Sevenoaks in person in the future. But bye for now.
Right. Well, thank you, Jesse. Our next speaker is BE Zone. Sorry, Emma Vanbergen. So Emma founded BE Education in 2003 with her husband William. Since when the company has grown considerably. As has Emma's reputation as one of the foremost educational experts in Asia. Today, Emma is going to be talking about the different types of scholarships that schools offer and what it is they're looking for in a candidate.
Okay, hello everyone. Yes, I wanted to talk about scholarships today. I know they're of huge interest to Asian families, particularly the music, drama, and music, art, and academic scholarships. Let me just start the slideshow. So I'm specifically talking about 13+ entry here. So obviously there are scholarships sometimes in the 6th form, but the majority are given for 13+. So I thought it most relevant to talk about 13+. How do I move this? So in general, we can speak of about 6 different types of scholarships: academic, art, music, design and technology, sports and drama. As I said, over the years, the ones that we've had most interest in are generally academic, art and music, just because that tends to be where our students are most talented. We have had a few drama scholarships over the years, and I think in total just 1 sports scholarship from a Chinese boy. So I'm going to just focus on the top 3 there. So what is a scholarship? Scholarship is not a bursary. So a bursary is basically a financial support for a family who needs financial support. And that could be a small amount to quite a large amount, even some schools covering full tuition. Whereas scholarships actually only offer about 5% off standard tuition. So typically they're not applied for with the mind of saving money. It's much more for the honor of having the scholarship and the recognition, of course, of a student's talent in a particular area. Scholarships are not trophies to show off for parents to show off to their friends. They're actually quite a long-term responsibility and commitment from the student to the school. So in return for the scholarship, the school actually expects quite a lot from the students who have gained them in terms of time commitment to the particular subject or responsibilities with regards to other students and their proactiveness in the department related to their scholarship. So I'll talk about music scholarships first. So what are schools looking for in a music scholar? Most importantly, I think passion for music. So obviously strong musicality, so a sense for music that goes far beyond a typical average kids. Normally the ability to play at least 2 instruments to a reasonable level. And that level tends to be that you're level grade 8 in ABRSM for one and sort of grade 5 in another. However, having said that, there's no requirement to have actually sat ABRSM tests or to be at a specific level. It's just a guideline of the ability that the student should have. And there should also be a strong understanding of music theory. Now, in return for that scholarship, what does the music department expect from the student? Quite a lot. So they expect them to participate in school orchestra, chamber orchestra, choir, to act as a role model to other musicians, to accompany other musicians who may not be as talented. And of course, they expect the student to study music all the way through till the 6th form, so potentially for A-levels, certainly through GCSE. So what does the audition entail? So the music scholarship typically involves an audition and an interview. And the audition element is first, the child will play 2 pieces that they've chosen, or a selection of pieces that they've chosen to show off different skills. And these pieces should be contrasting so that they're showing off different skills and different styles that the child can play, and really just showcasing as much of the child's talent as possible. Ideally, do not pick ABRSM pieces. They're very common, and music department heads will have listened to them many, many times. It also doesn't show any particular interest that the child has for a particular style of music or types of music, or indeed a composer that they might really like. So best not go on down the ABRSM piece. After they've played the pieces, they should expect questions about those pieces, such as what their tempo is, their time, key signatures. Also, how do they contrast those 2 pieces? Why were they chosen? And the context in which they were written by the composer. Also, I went to one music audition with a child, and he was asked to play the same piece again, but in a different mood. So he had quite a happy sort of high tempo piece, and they wanted to hear it in a more sad way. And it was basically testing out, does he actually have a sense for the music, and can he express mood through the music? Students will also be expected to do sight reading, so strong sight reading skills are a must, and they'll do some oral tests, with some schools even doing some short but challenging written papers, maybe about music theory and the likes. Typical questions for the interview would be why and when did you first start playing? Ideally, this is, the answer isn't because mummy and daddy made me when I was 4. It's got to be something that, you know, the child shows his genuine interest and motivation for learning the instruments. Questions about practice, so how often you practice, how do you structure your practice, how do you practice more challenging pieces, and how do you practice pieces you don't even enjoy particularly? Because obviously not every piece is a child's favorite piece, but we do have to learn them to improve skills and to improve. What's your long-term ambitions and plans? You know, does the child expect to take music to a professional level, or are they seeing it just as a hobby within their life for the rest of their life potentially? How does playing make you feel? What concerts have you been to and watched? What did they play? Why did you go to them? And how did you enjoy them or not? And who's your favorite composer and why? They're very typical questions, but obviously music heads can go completely off piste and ask very challenging questions if they feel necessary or really want to challenge a child. A few points on the instruments. Typically, just being able to play the piano is not sufficient to win a music instrument scholarship. unless you have a really, really talented child, so exceptionally talented. And of course, then the main reason is that schools typically only look to have 2 concert pianists, but maybe looking at as many as 30 violinists. So when they're selecting students for the scholarships, they are considering where do they have gaps in their orchestra, where do they need, which places do they need filling, and what instruments do they need. One of my students who gained a music scholarship was actually asked as part of the scholarship to take up a 3rd instrument, which the music department was missing basically and needed to fill in the orchestra. I should make one more point about music scholarships and indeed art scholarships. A lot of schools only offer the art scholarship and music scholarship to students who are already holding a place. This is because they are obviously making sure that the students meet the requirements of the school academically before they look at other talents. So students may only be able to sit the scholarships if they've already got a holding a place basically at the school in year 9. So art scholarships, again, they're looking for genuine passion for art, creativity, and a broad set of skills allowing for work in different mediums. In return, what does the school expect? They expect the child to study art all the way through GCSE, if not beyond, and they expect children to participate in exhibitions and competitions, and a huge amount of time commitment to spending their free time working on pieces in the art department. And of course, you would expect that anyway of an art scholar, because you would expect them to be interested enough to want to spend a large amount of their time in the art department. What does the interview entail? So the art scholarship typically has an interview, a practical piece of work where students are observed creating things, and a discussion and sort of chat around the portfolio that the child will bring in, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So students basically bring in a portfolio and they talk about pieces in the portfolio. So what was your inspiration for creating this piece? Why did you use a certain technique or medium when doing this piece? What might you do differently if you recreated the piece? What was the sort of the pathway that you took when creating this piece and the steps that you took when creating it? So students really need to be very capable about talking about work that they've done previously and about their motivation for creating it and the thoughts that they had behind creation of the work. The practical is typically a child is set an assignment so that the art teacher can observe the student actually creating their work in real time. And most art departments will ask for a still life as well as one other type of practical piece. So the children should be comfortable demonstrating their art and creating art in front of other people. And again, answering questions about why they did it in a certain way or why they took a certain process while creating the art. The interview, again, is not dissimilar to the music one. It's a lot about motivation and reason for learning art in the first place. So when and why did you start doing art? What inspires you most when you're creating pieces? Who is your favorite artist and why? And what have you done to reach your current standard of art? So what lessons have you taken? How regularly do you take lessons? And of course, where do you take lessons? Who is your tutor? What are your long-term ambitions in art is another one. So the portfolio is basically an opportunity for a child to showcase a huge breadth of skills, techniques, and styles. So it's very important that the portfolio doesn't just show one type of art over and over, because that only shows the child is capable of creating that one type of piece. So it's really important that kids pick from different styles and sort of inspirations, and again include not just 2D work, but potentially 3D work, which you can include by taking photos of sculptures or pottery that you've done or ceramics. There's also nothing wrong in including mistakes or errors in the portfolio. It shows where the child is learning. The child can talk about them and explain, actually, how did I improve since then, and how do I not make that mistake again? All the work in the portfolio should be unique, inspired, and imaginative. copies of other artists' work will really not impress anybody. It's not showing any imagination or creativity. And all it's doing is demonstrating the ability to copy something else, which doesn't make for a good art scholar, really. The other thing that children should bring along to their art practical and sort of interview is their sketchbook. It says a lot about the ideas that kids come up with. Also, it shows the beginnings of ideas that may have ultimately ended up in the portfolio. And again, it's another talking point that a child can walk the head of art through. Academic scholarships. So these, unlike the other two, can be often can be applied for even if you don't have a place at the school already. So if you're not holding an unconditional offer or a conditional offer from Eton, you can still apply for the King's Scholarship. And I know that sounds odd in that parents might wonder how on earth can the child get in on a King's Scholarship but not through the normal route. And that may be something to do with being very academic. If a child is very academic in a normal channel, and when they go through the normal process of interviewing at places like Eton, they may be considered sort of two-dimensional and not having enough extracurricular activities because they're so involved in academics. And that may mean that the interviewer doesn't feel that they're suitable for the school. However, obviously that doesn't mean that they are not suitable for a scholarship, where having academic interest and being particularly focused on academics is of course not a shortcoming and can gain them a place if they want. So what are schools expecting from academic scholars or looking for in scholars? They're looking for participation in academic competitions. They're looking for exceptional intelligence, so not just a good student, but a genuinely intellectually sort of capable and extraordinary academic ability sort of in a student. They're looking for passion for learning beyond the classroom. So these type of kids, particularly at the elite schools, are kids who enjoy learning outside the classroom and will often have their head buried in a book about a subject they're interested in. And in return, they expect the child to excel academically throughout their life at the school. And of course, there's no question that most of them do because they are so exceptionally talented intellectually. They look for them to serve as a role model to less academic students and maybe even to support other students in their learning. So again, there's some commitment expected from a scholar and obviously a little bit of pressure in that they're supposed to excel academically throughout their school life over the 5 years that they'll be at senior school. So the nature of the test, it varies greatly from school to school, but I've picked 3 of the more academic schools to demonstrate the differences. So Eton's King's Scholarship requires 4 compulsory papers, English, Maths A, a Science and General Paper 1. And then students can pick 3 optional papers from Geography and Divinity, French, Latin, Greek, Maths B, a general paper, a tripartite paper with questions on history, geography and divinity. And Winchester, very similar actually, 4 compulsory papers, English, Maths 1, Science and General Paper 1. At least 3 optional papers from Latin, French, Greek, history, geography, Maths 2 and General Paper 2. And Wickham Abbey actually expects quite a lot compulsory papers, English, Maths, Science, History, Geography, Religious Studies, and a modern language, with optional papers in Latin and Greek if the child has obviously taken them at school. That would be most relevant to students who are studying at prep schools in the UK. What to expect in exams? Now, I've just picked some questions from a selection of schools from their general papers. And I think as I read them out, you'll be surprised by the standard of difficulty and sort of how deep they go when they're really sort of targeted at 12 and 13-year-olds only. I think indeed most parents and most adults would find these quite challenging to consider and write a piece on. So an example is it wrong to believe anything unless there is sufficient evidence? Discuss how and why might the happiness of a society be measured? Discuss the political problems likely to emerge from advances in digital technologies. Will machines eventually replace teachers? Would this be a good thing? Are some cultures more advanced than others? The impact of social media upon individuals and society has been profoundly negative. Discuss. Schools should focus more on STEM subjects than arts and humanities discuss. They're really thought-provoking, very open-ended, and they can go in various different directions. And given that these tests are obviously time restricted, it's asking a lot for a child to contemplate this and then write out a well thought through answer. So it's a real challenge for a normal 12 or 13-year-old wouldn't be able to do it. But for the children who are suitable for academic scholarships, they really enjoy these sort of intellectual discussions and types of questions. So this is geography, and I thought this is probably more sixth form level than year 9 level, but again, it's directed at 12 and 13-year-olds. Rivers, mountains, cracks in the ground, and many other natural phenomena appear similar at different scales. Why might this be? In geographical investigation, what is more useful, data that covers a large spatial area or data that covers a large span of time? Compare and contrast colonialism with globalization. What influences the impact of hazard the most? Poverty, building quality, or chance? Interpret, the mountains flowed down at the presence of the Lord. The last question in particular it's a really challenging question. Even for me, I find it difficult to see how a biblical phrase can be sort of relevant to geography and how a child would handle that. Here's a maths paper. I won't go through and read it all, but I'll give you some time to look at it. Obviously giving a diagram and giving them basic information and then asking some quite challenging questions to solve it. Indeed, the child may not have actually studied this at school. So they're asking children to apply knowledge that they have gained either through their supercurricular activities or just concepts that they have in their brain, and challenging them with a really difficult question where they have to really stretch their mind to answer it. So this is King's Scholarship. Again, you can see how difficult it is. The King's Scholarship only awards 14 places every year. So it really is for the intellectually exceptional. Here's a King's Scholarship science question. So it's giving samples of various metals in test tubes, and they're adding hydrochloric acid of a certain concentration. And then the diagram is showing the different reactivity of the metals by showing bubbles and different bubbles basically, which is the reaction it's having to the metals. And no bubbles were seen in copper and silver. And then it's asking other questions about the reactions, writing equations about what might be happening, adding different types of acids to the test tubes, and explaining why certain reactions are taking place and others aren't. Really quite challenging for the young boy. This one is actually not an art scholarship paper. It's a general paper from Winchester election. So this is giving Pablo Picasso painted self-portraits of himself over the years, and asking what you think the artist might try to show in a self-portrait and why you might try to show about yourself in a self-portrait. So it's a really sort of challenging question. It's not something that many children would contemplate, I don't think. But I must say this type of question is becoming more and more popular, even in standard interviews now at schools like Wellington, and Radley and all different places, where schools are giving children an image and asking them to contemplate what it means, or what the meaning is behind it, or why the artist did it, or what the motivation for the artist was. They're really challenging types of questions, and really when you put a child on the just ask them off the top of their heads what they're thinking and don't give them much room to consider, it's quite challenging, and it tells you a lot about the child in where their thinking goes, which is why they're so popular. So what is the preparation? So it's different for different students in terms of where they are in which school. At a prep school, it's very easy to prepare. Prep schools basically at year 7 will put students into a scholarship form if they believe that they're suitable for a scholarship, or if they just believe that they need to study beyond the curriculum, beyond common entrance, because they need stretching. So they may not believe that a student genuinely has the ability to get a scholarship, but they believe that the student needs stretching beyond the common entrance curriculum. So they put them in a class and then they basically prepare that class for scholarships and in the different schools that they're selecting for scholarship level. Now, of course, if they're looking at the likes of Winchester, Eton, Wickham Abbey, the really academic schools, the content of those scholarships and the difficulty level will be quite similar. So they can study together and they'll hold discussions on various things like the thought-provoking questions I saw, so that they can sort of see where children's mind go and their children can feed off each other and learn from each other. But they also do a lot of training on past papers. The good thing is past papers are readily available for most schools which have scholarships. Either they're on the school website like Eton, or you can just ask the school like Wickham Abbey for some sample papers from previous years. And they really are good training. And indeed, you do see a lot of commonality in the English papers, for example. Both Winchester and Wickham Abbey like to do quite challenging sixth form level poems. But using either paper from either school will still help train the student and improve their skills. So year 8 in a prep school is spent drilling on those papers and really practicing over and over again, so that when the student takes the test, they're not alarmed at the difficulty and they have a sense for what to expect and how to answer the questions to the best of their ability. So constant practice is the best training, really. Now, kids in Hong Kong, I expect, and China do a lot of extra school tutoring to actually work beyond their own school curriculum, because the school won't necessarily cover the content of the tests. In fact, they probably don't. And of course, they also train on past papers, as most schools, again, happily provide samples. So it's a lot of work. It's not something that students should do half-heartedly. If you're going to apply for a scholarship, you need to invest a lot of time in preparing for it. But again, I think students who are intellectually capable enough really enjoy the preparation and find it quite challenging and quite fun to stretch their minds in this way. And that's exactly what the type of student should be who is suitable for a scholarship. A few notes on scholarships. Most academic applicants for academic scholarships will not get a scholarship. However, if you're holding an offer from a school already and you perform well enough in the scholarship exams, then the offer often will become unconditional and the school will waive the requirement of sitting common entrance. So as I said, some schools will actually suggest the student sits a scholarship to stretch them academically, but also so that they don't have to sit common entrance later down the road. Instead, they take the scholarship, perform well enough, hopefully, and then they can get their firm offer from the school of choice, even though they didn't win the scholarship. Some schools invite students who have sat normal entrance exams to sit scholarship exams. So this is based on the outcome of their entrance exams. They select very capable students who performed exceptionally well on their 13+ papers and invite them to sit the exams at the school. So that's something that Wickham Abbey does, for example. I'd say there's very little point pushing a student who is not capable of managing the rigorous and abnormally difficult level of a scholarship exam to sit a scholarship. It's much better to focus them on securing a place through the normal route. There is no need to push your child to do a scholarship if they're not good enough. There's nothing wrong with getting into Eton the normal way. You know, most 95+% of the kids are actually going through the normal route and taking common entrance. So if your child isn't capable of scholarship, but is capable of gaining a place at somewhere like Eton or Winchester, feel proud of them anyway, I think is my point. If your child is in a prep school in the UK, typically the headmaster can advise you on whether or not your child is actually scholarship potential. And that goes with all scholarships. You know, they'll be able to see if they're suitable for art and music as well as academic. And I'd like to make one more point, which is a little sort of tip. If students are on waiting lists at certain schools and really want to demonstrate you know, that they're very capable academically and want to send a message to the school that they're really working hard, that they've improved a lot maybe since they took their pre-test a couple of years back, then sitting a scholarship and performing well can often be a great way to get the head of admissions to notice you on the waiting list and potentially consider moving you off if a place becomes available. So a small tip there for kids who are sitting on the wait list, but obviously only do it if you're comfortable knowing that your child can perform well on the academic scholarship. That's all I have to sort of share with you today. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Emma, thank you very, very much indeed for that. We do have a question from Shanghai, and I'm a big fan of Emma. I'm so glad to meet you here. Recently, my kid wants to quit music, but he's playing the piano and the black pipe for over 6 years already. Any advice for me? Because I know you're a great mum too. I'm not quite sure what black pipe is, but I think that it sounds like someone's lost a bit of love for music here.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think it's very difficult to keep kids interested. I'd say the most important thing is that they enjoy it. So if, for example, you're pushing them to do exams in the ABRSM or anything, maybe take the pressure off for a little bit and just let them pick their music and play it. It's always a great thing to have a musical talent or just to be able to play music for senior school applications. So if your child's thinking longer term study in England, even if it isn't scholarship level, then it's a real selling point to be able to tell a school that you're able to play 2 instruments to a good degree. So maybe have a sit down chat with him. Maybe he wants to try a different instrument. Obviously, as students get older, they get more pressure at school, so they have less time for these things. But if that's his thing and that's his real talent, then try and keep him to stick with it, because it will pay off when he applies for schools in England.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice, Emma. If there are no more questions? Great, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Emma. Very, very thought-provoking. And if anybody does have further questions they want to ask later, please do send them in, and we will endeavour to answer as many as we can.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, well, our next speaker is Diana Harrison, who is Senior Deputy Head at St Mary's Calne. Diana studied engineering at Cambridge University before starting a teaching career which spanned 25 years. Her teaching career has included starts at Caterham School, Prior Park College and Down House, before becoming a house mistress of the girls' boarding house at Bradfield College. She's been Senior Deputy Head at St Mary's Calne for the past 7 years. She's passionate about girls not being limited by stereotypes and helping girls follow their passion. Now, Diana, unfortunately, is not able to join us today live, but she's very kindly recorded this video especially for you today, in which she'll be talking to us about the benefits of practical working and problem solving in science.
Hello, I'm Diana Harrison, and as well as being the Senior Deputy Head here at St Mary's Calne, I'm also a physics teacher, so the teaching of science is something that's very close to my heart. We're lucky here at St Mary's Calne to have a vibrant and dynamic science department, something that was recognised when we were awarded the Platinum Science Award a few years ago. We are still the only independent school in the country to have this award. And because we're an independent school, we can choose our own curriculum. So we do. We have the opportunity to include things such as engineering and independent project work, as well as practical investigations, because science is so much more than learning facts. Instead, in science, as in life, it's arguably more important to learn the skills of creative and critical thinking than knowledge on its own. Because these skills are what pupils need to problem solve, not just in school, but when they leave and go on to university and to jobs. The last 18 months or so have shown more than ever that the future is unpredictable and that the ability to analyse, evaluate and solve problems is extremely valuable. While science is by no means the only part of the curriculum where these skills are needed, it is the area where they are crucial to success. Therefore, science investigations must be an integral part of a science curriculum. In fact, experiments are what makes science different from other subjects. And we know that practical work is important to the pupils, both in terms of enjoyment as well as understanding. So we make sure we have enough time allocated in the timetable. There is plenty of time to include experiments in science lessons. The way science is taught here means that pupils are expected to answer the questions posed in science using these practical investigations, to find out what the answer is, not just to be told what the answer is. The reason for this is because when Ofsted, the school inspection body here in the UK, surveyed 180 schools in 2013, it found that pupils achieve higher results in science when they are involved in planning, carrying out and evaluating practical investigations. So practical investigations are very important because they teach the pupils to think for themselves. They engage with the subject at a deeper level, and that is why experimental science is very much part and parcel of what teaching and learning looks like here at St Mary's Science Department. A study in 2007 found that 13 to 14-year-old pupils in England are more likely to spend their lesson time doing practical science activities than many of their international counterparts. And we do more practical work than most UK schools due to the enthusiasm of our specialist science staff and the facilities and equipment we have available here at school. The Programme for International Student Assessment, or PISA, did a study in 2015 which showed the UK as being one of only 7 countries out of 72 that showed above average achievement in science, above average understanding of the nature of scientific claims, and above average interest in a scientific career. A link between the amount of time doing practical activities and these 3 things has yet to be proven internationally, but in my mind they are obviously linked. Doing practical investigations in science leads to a better understanding and interest in science. And as you can see from this quote from David Sainsbury of the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, set up to strengthen science and engineering skills in the UK by developing innovative programmes and informing national policy, he agrees with me. So what skills do pupils learn through doing practical investigations in science? Well, firstly, they must hypothesise. What is likely to happen? This introduces the concept of applying knowledge rather than just recalling it. Knowing relevant facts about what you are doing is clearly important. You can't use concepts you don't know. But what is more important is being able to use these facts effectively by applying them to a situation you haven't come across before. By coming up with a hypothesis, pupils need to draw on what they've learnt in previous lessons and apply it to the question they're trying to answer. In other words, they predict what they think will happen in the experiment they are about to do using what they know so far. A simple example of this in GCSE physics would be when investigating resistance. The pupils know that the electrons moving between and colliding with the cations cause resistance, and so can hypothesise that if the wire is longer, the resistance will be greater because the electrons will collide with more cations. Just doing the experiment mechanically without engaging with it intellectually does not increase understanding, so this predicting step is very important. Academically, this helps in examinations because the pupils don't have to memorise every possible situation that might come up. They have practiced applying their knowledge to unknown situations and so are ready to deal with anything that comes their way. After the hypothesising comes the planning stage, or writing the method, which is an extremely valuable skill in its own right. It encompasses computational thinking and uses algorithms that the pupils here at St Mary's will have come across in their maths and computing lessons. We prepare the pupils for doing this level of detailed planning, not just in our innovative science curriculum, where for the first 2 years the pupils will study engineering, chemical, biological and mechanical, alongside the more traditional areas, but by also having a large number of computing lessons dedicated to coding. And all pupils do computing for the first 3 years of school. Because the pupils not only have to think about what has to be done, but also in what order to do it and what equipment to use. Writing the method to a practical means that the pupils must break down the overall task, the practical, into a series of smaller steps that must all be done in the right order in order to complete the task. As doing practical work is relatively easy to visualise, it helps the pupils develop this skill, which goes hand in hand with computer programming. Equally, outside the classroom, when, for example, pupils are on the Duke of Edinburgh expeditions or involved with other group activities, the ability to break down a large task into smaller, more manageable ones helps them be good leaders by improving their ability to motivate and communicate with their team. In all experiments, one must also choose what to change and what to keep the same. If too many things are changed at once, then it's not clear which single thing has caused the outcome. In other words, pupils have to make decisions based on their own understanding, and they need to prioritise as to what remains constant throughout and what they must vary. Decision making does not come easily to everyone, but by starting to make low-stakes decisions, the pupils can build up to making bigger decisions as they move up the school, which may have larger consequences. This is just yet another example of where the skills that are learned and practiced in science, if practical investigations are part and parcel of the curriculum, can be transferred over into life in general. Decision-making and prioritisation are life skills that will stand all our pupils in good stead. And of course, when planning an experiment, pupils also have to do a risk analysis to decide if what they are doing is safe, or whether any extra precautions, goggles, gloves, etc. are required. This is particularly true in chemistry. Doing a risk analysis, what might go wrong, is sometimes tricky for the teenage brain, but it's very important for them to improve this skill. Thinking of the worst case scenario and what could be done to prevent it is always useful, and is something some adults could do with improving. These skills all come together when the pupils take part in such events as the Bloodhound Challenge, making rocket cars to race, designing the most streamlined shape in order to get the greatest acceleration. Seeing how their planning affects the outcome prevents pupils making changes without thinking. You can't stick back on the bit of foam you've just cut off. They have to do things in the right order and to think through the consequences of that action, a valuable skill in all areas of life. So it's by doing these practical activities they recognise and practice putting these skills into action. Therefore, St Mary's pupils tend to do very well in competitions because they're used to doing all of these things during their science lessons. An excellent science education has to include these practical opportunities, not just to engage the pupils in what they are doing, but also to show them what is and isn't practically possible. Once an experiment is underway, the pupils must use observation skills to spot slight differences. When are more bubbles of carbon dioxide produced by the plant? What is the exact tipping point of the block? When does the indicator change colour? These close observation skills are easily transferable to other areas and subjects where they are equally useful. For example, close visual observation skills are very important in the creative arts. Looking and really looking improves concentration. A superficial glance won't be good enough. Glance away and you might miss the crucial point. In a time when so many young people are used to looking at fast-moving things on a screen, taking the time to really observe what is going on is something that is often missed. The practical world makes them watch carefully in order to gain accurate data and improves the length of time they can concentrate on just one thing. Alongside this, the pupils also have to be aware of any other factors that might have affected the experiment. They need to be alert and attuned to the world around them. For example, did the sun come out halfway through the experiment, changing the light levels and the temperature? They are continually assessing the impact of the environment and checking all is well. This will be extremely important when they are looking to interpret their results and draw conclusions. Equally, the ability to see things in the context of a wider picture is yet another transferable skill that will be important for them in the future. Context is crucial in so many areas. Analysis of the results of the experiment enables the pupils to spot patterns and trends, as well as drawing more scientific conclusions. Pupils here at St Mary's have dedicated maths lessons in lower 4 and middle 4 to help them hone these skills and problem solve mathematically. They can extrapolate as to what may happen in similar circumstances and come up with a rule that describes it, equally at home with mathematical equations to describe their data as they are with graphs and charts. It's no surprise that this skill is highly valued in the financial world as well as the scientific one. Analysing markets and predicting share prices goes hand in hand with looking at data from an experiment and coming up with a conclusion that will apply to similar scenarios in the future. It's not a coincidence that lots of scientifically trained people do end up with careers in investments and finance. Evaluation of how good the experiment was is paramount. Pupils must learn to weigh different evidence and recognise anomalies that don't fit the pattern. Why don't they fit the pattern? What was different for that result? Is that something that needs to be investigated further, or something that could be ignored? Pupils learn that you can sometimes learn as much from what has gone wrong as what has gone right. All too often in the world of young people, failure and mistake are not words they can face. By doing science investigations, they can learn that a failure or a mistake often opens another different door to a better idea or path. Many famous scientific discoveries have happened because of mistakes. If mould hadn't contaminated Alexander Fleming's Petri dishes, i.e. he did his experiment under proper sterile conditions, we would not have penicillin today. Back in the school laboratory, having a practical not go as planned helps build resilience and encourage the pupils to persevere and keep going. Again, vital life skills that are needed for pupils to have successful lives. Finally, the pupils will need to work out what they still don't know. What are the limits of their conclusion? And what might be the appropriate next steps to find this missing information out? It can be easy to think in absolutes. If X happens, then Y will. But our pupils need to be able to apply higher and more subtle thinking. If X happens, then Y will, but only when Z is true. In-depth discussions after the experiment is over really clarify pupils' understanding of what has happened and embed the ideas and theories that need to be covered. Also, what caused what to happen? Can the pupils explain what happened, or do they need a better understanding in order to do so? This is what pushes the science curriculum on from GCSE to A-level and beyond. Pupils want a better, more in-depth understanding of what they have observed in the laboratory, and so continue to want to take science to the next stage. Going back to that PISA study I mentioned at the beginning, they have a greater interest in having a career in science. All of these stages of a scientific investigation require the pupils to actually think, and to think in subtly different ways. It's this process of thinking that makes the pupils not only better scientists, but also better academic students, both at school and university. They have learned to analyse a problem so that they can solve it by breaking it down into manageable chunks. They're able to critically evaluate what is going on and adapt what they are doing appropriately. They're able to spot patterns and predict what might happen next. All of this is so much more valuable than just being able to recite the periodic table or describe an experiment that you have seen. The Gatsby Foundation states it very succinctly when they say this: practical science gives pupils practical skills and attitudes that will be valuable in their future careers. It's no surprise then, with all the practical work that goes on here at St Mary's, every year we get pupils pursuing degrees in science at top universities such as Oxbridge and Imperial, as well as those abroad. The pupils are inspired to go on to learn more, know that they have the investigative skills that will be required. However, the pupils who decide not to take science further have also gained valuable skills along the way. I may get asked by pupils, why do I need to learn about total internal reflection? But I never get asked, why do I need to learn how to plan and evaluate? So next time you're thinking about science and practical work, remember all the extra skills that are learnt alongside the scientific knowledge when science is taught through experiments. The skills the pupils learn are invaluable, both in school and beyond. It's why here at St Mary's we will continue to teach science through practical investigations. It's imperative that we do so in order to prepare all our pupils for the future. Thank you for listening.
My name's William. I came to China in 2003 to start BE education with the aim of helping Chinese students to get access to the very best foreign education in the world. At the time, I didn't speak any Chinese. I didn't have any money. I didn't really have any friends in China. I knew about 3 people in the entire country. So it was quite difficult to get started, but we worked very hard. We stuck to 3 very simple principles: to do whatever's best for the students, to give really good service to our customers, and to be honest. Through doing that, we managed to get the first few students into the very, very top schools in England, like Eton, Wickham Abbey, Winchester and Westminster. And then the word started to spread. And so the business basically built up just by word of mouth.
BE has sent students to the top schools for 15 years. There is no other track record in China that comes close to hitting ours. What does that mean? That means that we have very good relationships with the registrars. If there are late places at schools, we get informed. And it means that our students are the best prepared for these tests because we've got a long track record of preparing students for these top schools.
I think we have about 140 people now working here helping students from all over China.
It's a momentous decision sending your child abroad. We really care. Every student is different to us. We look at individuals and work out what is best for them. Once we've gone through this study plan with you, we'll form a team around your son or daughter to make sure that they have everything they need to get to the best possible point. We will hold your hand all that way through until they start their first career. You may ask why come to BE education versus anyone else is around our expertise. Once we've gone through this study plan with you, we'll form a team around your son or daughter to make sure that they have everything they need to get to the best possible point. There are experts that we might call on. To give you an example, we have Emma Vanbergen, who's been helping children go to these institutes for the last 17 years, and she can give the best possible advice about how to do that final preparation.
我们的老师我一直跟到现在也没有换过。第一个是 Ellen 老师，还有一个就是 Sophie 老师。这2位老师从我们2015年踏入 BE 的第一天起，一直是 follow 我们到现在。Sophie 老师年轻有活力，中文也好，很爱跟孩子打交道。而且这些年他英国的学校跑得很多，像 rugby 公学啊 CLC 啊。
So I think probably the most popular schools for my children have been rugby. It's probably 6 or 7. Downhouse, Children and Ladies College. They're probably the top 3, I would say, in terms of numbers of where people have gone.
英国名校找的是与众不同的孩子，2个成绩同样优秀的孩子，招生官一定会选择接触过英国文化和教育的学生。这是为什么我会建议家长们提前送孩子去英国读书。
BE Education has been helping students with their study abroad needs for 16 years. Get in touch for a free consultation now.
I think it's very important to pick an advisor who will properly assess your child. If an advisor immediately provides a list of schools having not met your child, having not assessed them, then they are clearly not picking suitable schools for your child. They're just giving a list of schools.
Once we've gone through this study plan with you, we'll form a team around your son or daughter to make sure that they have everything they need to get to the best possible point. This will include one single advisor who will be the person in charge of the whole journey. It also means if you need to plan visits to the UK or to see these institutes, that we have a very thorough plan for making the most of the time that you spend out there. We will also include a study advisor, and that person will make sure that all the educational elements along that pathway are completed. That includes making sure the right tutors are used at the appropriate times. So what we'll do between the time that you get offers and arriving in the school is prepare both mentally but also academically for that first term. They can cover a number of topics early so that when they arrive they're ahead of their peers and they can just settle into life at school and begin to make new friends. For some parents there is a great deal of worry about sending their child 10,000 miles away. For that we have some bespoke services delivered by our London-based team, which involves mentoring the student while they're at those schools. This can be as simple as arranging guardianship. It also includes having some of our academic experts in the UK go along to parent meetings and understand the progress of your son or daughter. We are making sure that all of the great things that these institutes offer are being taken advantage of.
我一直相信，交专业的事情交给专业的人去做。我始终认为我是一个合格的妈妈，但我不是一个很好的老师。幼儿园升小以及小学升中学的时候，我们都选择了不一样的老师或者是机构来辅导他的功课，而我需要做的是更好的去选择这个机构。到了中学以后，我们就开始有了 BE， 就 BE 在他整个学术跟生活上面的帮助是非常多的，所以即便是他现在在国外，其实我是一点都不担心的，因为在海外其实有海外的 BE 的团队在帮我们定他所有的学术，包括他的家庭，所有的这些东西，就是关心的无微不至的。
之前找到 BE， 我其实是想给女儿是申请美国的学校的，然后做了一些背景调查，我发现 BE 教育在英国申请方面有极大的优势，不夸张的说，就已经顶了英国留学申请的一片天。而且我也觉得，就孩子的低龄留学，可能英国比美国更适合，所以就是很突然的转了一个方向。
其实我们原来的计划也没有那么早送出去，是想到初中或者是高中，可能等他能够稍微再独立一点，因为当时家里其实还是挺担心他的。 但是呢，我们其实也尝试了一下，参加了2次 BE 的夏令营。在夏令营以后呢，反馈出来他其实相对于同年龄的小孩还是比较独立的，能够承受到国外独自生活。
他到了英国去的这么大半年，让我还是感觉到他也轻松了，我也轻松了，给了我们各自的空间和时间去平复心情，让我们真正的去感受各自在各自的空间领域里的乐趣。
I'm Joy and Queena's mom. I'm with BE.
I'm Helen. I'm with BE.
I'm Jason.
I'm Amy. Jason's mommy.
I'm with BE.
Let's be creative.
Let's be happy.
Let's be happy.
我是 Vanbergen， 我和我老公是 BE Education 教育的创始人。我们2002年碰到了一个朋友，在大学的时候，然后他妈妈有个朋友想要把他孩子送到英国去，所以呢，他问我们对英国的学校有什么想法，然后能把他送到哪个学校。结果呢，我们找到了一个非常适合他的一个学校了，然后他很开心，所以妈妈给我们一个小的礼物。然后我老公是一直想要办他自己的公司，所以他突然想到，哎呀，这个是很好的一个机会了。然后我们2003年毕业的时候就跑到中国去，然后建立 BE 教育。British schools, I think, have always been linked with the upper class. This is no longer the case by far. There is a lot of support there. There are matrons all over the place. If the child is ill in the night, they can go and knock on the door of a matron. They all live very close together. And there are 24-hour nurses at these schools, so that if a child has any severe sickness, there's somebody on hand to deal with it. So they will have a tutor who keeps an eye on them in terms of their academics and also checks that they're in the right place at the right time. One of the things that I suggest is you have to be your child's best cheerleader. They have a lot of pressure on them, and a lot of parents don't understand the pressure that their child is going through. This is a new country. They're doing everything in a new language. It is very stressful for these children, and they are tired. And it is very important that the parent is always positive and encouraging.
You may ask why come to BE Education versus anyone else is around our expertise. Once we've gone through this study plan with you, we'll form a team around your son or daughter to make sure that they have everything they need to get to the best possible point. There are experts that we might call on. To give you an example, we have Emma Vanbergen, who's been helping children go to these institutes for the last 17 years, and she can give the best possible advice about how to do that final preparation.
我们的老师我一直跟到现在，也没有换过。第一个是 Ellen 老师，还有一个就是 Sophie 老师。这2位老师从我们2015年踏入 BE 的第一天起，一直是 follow 我们到现在。Sophie 老师年轻有活力，中文也好，很爱跟孩子打交道。 而且这些年他英国的学校跑得很多，像 rugby 公学啊 CLC 啊。
So I think probably the most popular schools for my children have been rugby. It's probably 6 or 7. Downhouse, Charlton Ladies College. They're probably the top 3, I would say, in terms of numbers of where people have gone.
英国名校找的是与众不同的孩子，两个成绩同样优秀的孩子，招生官一定会选择接触过英国文化和教育的学生。这是为什么我会建议家长们提前送孩子去英国读书。
BE Education has been helping students with their study abroad needs for 16 years. Get in touch for a free consultation now.
Hi, I'm Emma Vanbergen, co-founder in BE Education, where we've been sending students to study abroad successfully since 2003.
My name is Victor Wong. I will be entering Winchester College.
我叫杨清诺，今年12岁，9月份我将正式进入 Rugby 中学。
Really enjoy the life in Downhouse. I think with girls you can actually focus more in lesson because you don't need to think about makeup and other things, you know.
每个孩子他的个性不一样，性格不同，并不一定是排名第一的就是最好的。
So we recommend for parents of very young children to first go on a school visit. It's important to look at what the community is like in the school. Eton, for example, is somewhere that would require quite an independent, quite ambitious, self-driven child. Bradley is a smaller school, and I think there's a little bit more support there for boys. Once they've seen these schools, they get to see their future and they become more motivated.
专业性也要考虑到，我们应该把该做的事情交给最专业的团队。 作为家长，都是想把最好的给孩子。我觉得教育更是值得的。首先有这种前瞻性，有远见，早早的考虑。
真的等到孩子开始他的留学生涯了以后，那我们作为家长一定要给孩子无条件的爱，支持他们，关心他。
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from another little interlude. We're now ready to introduce our next speaker, who is Rebecca Tan, who's Headmistress at Badminton. Beck joined Badminton as Headmistress in 2012 and has worked in single-sex environments for the last 24 years. She has extensive knowledge in the education of girls and a passion for ensuring that they become confident, curious, lifelong learners. She recently gained the postgraduate diploma in entrepreneurship from Cambridge University's Judge Business School, stoking her fire to guarantee that the girls in her care have access to opportunities free of gender bias. Rebecca will be talking to us today about an educational experience that prepares the citizens of 2030 and beyond. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So I'm just going to share some slides, if that's okay, to talk us through this morning. Here we go. Hi, so as Raf said, talking about preparing citizens for 2030 and beyond, and that's quite a big deal, but I think that we have a framework here at Badminton that can certainly do that, and I think this is exactly what good schools are doing right now. So our promise at Badminton, which is a pretty huge one, is that we say we provide the best preparation for living and working in a global society. That's absolutely huge, isn't it? What a claim to make. And I think there's 2 reasons why we can do that. First and foremost, it's our community feeling. You can see from that picture, we're on a historic campus, and it's actually located in Bristol, which is a lovely small city in the southwest of England. On this campus, we've got around 550 students, and everybody knows everybody really well. We're contained on our campus. It's a lovely, safe, beautiful environment, and we have trusting relationships with one another. And I think if ever you were to visit, you'd feel that the minute you step through the gates. And it is that trusting environment which enables learning to really happen so well. You see, learning takes place at the edge of your comfort zone. To learn something new, you've got to take a step forward, try something out, something you haven't done before, perhaps implement a new skill, and put up your hand to ask a question you're not sure about. But to do that, you've got to be confident that the people around you are going to accept you for who you are and not make fun of you. They've got to be prepared to support you and cheerlead you on. And being in a community like Badminton means that happens in every lesson, in every extracurricular activity every day. People are willing to give things a go because they know everybody so well and they trust one another. So learning takes place literally minute every minute of every day, and there are no bars to that, which is great. So I think this community thing is really important. The second reason that I think that we can deliver on this is the way we learn at badminton. And learning doesn't just take place in the classroom. I mean, we've got fantastic teachers who are passionate about their subjects, and they really want to press on and get the young people to get high and successful grades in those subjects. But that's not the be all and end all. They know that understanding the subject, getting underneath the skin of it, really getting a sense of what it likes to live that subject is what these young people need. And that's what we do. So through the next slides, I'm going to talk about just how we do that. At the moment in the world, there's a big sort of dynamic tension between what schools should deliver. Is it academic qualifications or is it skills? We've all in this world been through the COVID pandemic. It's something we've all shared, and we've seen the world change because of it. The world changed fast. We all had to adapt. We had to move on. And that's what these young people will face in their future, being able to adapt quickly. So having one set of knowledge is not enough for their future. One good qualification isn't enough. They need a whole raft of life skills that underpin it. Don't get me wrong, badminton does have great academic outcomes. As I mentioned just now, the way we learn all the time in every way in this trusting environment enables really great results. Our value added on individual pupils really does make us proud. Pupils tend to exceed their potential at badminton, and that's what we're aiming to do. This year alone, about 10% of our upper six cohort holding places at Oxford or Cambridge. That's fantastic for a small school like us, and we're really proud of those individual girls. We have a whole range of students going on to medical school this year, to veterinary school, to art colleges, and to top universities around the world. So when I say we're really focusing on skills as well, don't worry, we're not neglecting the academics. We do set great store by them. We know that the young people who leave us need fantastic academic qualifications to enable their next steps. So alongside that, we really recognise now that they have to have these skills, these life skills, in order to cope in their career. So let's talk about the skills and how we achieve them. A first key skill has to be communication. I'm talking to you now, hopefully quite successfully, about what we do at badminton. And in your jobs, you know how many skills you will need. You may have to be pitching for a new project or a new client. You may have to be negotiating the budget for your department. You may have to be just getting a deliverable over the line and explaining it to your line manager. Whatever we do, whether it's legal, medical, education, we have to communicate, and that will never change. Communication, I think, is a key space where humans themselves add value. We have a way of being able to nuance what we say, to interact with one another, to read facial expressions, to read body language as a whole. All of these things make it an intrinsic human skill, which at the moment, artificial intelligence really can't replicate in the same way. And so this is such a valuable skill to make sure that the young people in our care at badminton are absolutely tip-top at. And we do that. We find so many ways of getting them to communicate in different ways. Of course, there's written communication every day, the notes they're making for themselves, the assignments that they write for their teachers, how they communicate with their tutor verbally every morning, how they communicate with other year groups as they negotiate clubs and activities, how they communicate on the netball court or on the football pitch. We want them to have those really good non-verbal communication skills as well. And the confidence. Communication is all about confidence. And so we give them platforms to communicate in so many ways. It starts right down in our junior school. In the last week, we've seen in years 4 and 6, as well as in our sixth form, girls taking the English speaking board exam. We set great store by actually doing some proper preparation for presentation, delivering it and being assessed on it. This is a key thing because, as you know, in the world of work or even in the academic world, we have to make these deliverable presentations. There's times when it's softly deliverable too. So when we send them out for a maths competition or even a foreign language speaking competition, they've got to have that confidence to take the stage, to articulate the answers and to deliver. And of course, in things like speech and drama, We have a whole range of speech and drama lessons and presentations, and of course those bigger plays that the girls love to be involved in, no matter what year group they're in, be it a year group play, a house play, or a whole school play. There's an opportunity for everyone to find their role and take their part. So we think this is a really important thing, communicating verbally, communicating in writing, and of course communicating electronically. And in recent times, we've seen a lot of remote learning with the COVID pandemic, and we've had protocols from that because, of course, the type of electronic communication they might have with their friends on Instagram, WhatsApp, even sort of other electronic platforms is not the same as we'd expect to their teacher, to their peers in a school context. And so it's been a really great time to refine the sort of rigor and rules around what type of electronic communication is appropriate at what time. So helping them understand judicial use of communication, what is the right type of forum, the right type of format for the communication they're making, so they can get it right in school, they can practice it. Then when they step to university or the workplace, they know what's appropriate in a formal email, an informal email, a school WhatsApp group as opposed to a friend's WhatsApp group. These types of nuances are what's needed in communication. Moving on then, iteration. That might seem a funny skill to talk about, but I think it's so fundamental to success in young people and in ourselves. When I was studying entrepreneurship, I looked at what is it that makes entrepreneurs succeed? Well, of course, it's that fantastic tenacity. When they have a product and they take it to market and perhaps it doesn't quite take off, they have focus groups. They ask why, what's wrong? What do I need to do to get it over the line? They're hungry for that information that tells them how to be a success. And that's what we need in our young people. When we hand back an assignment, we need them not to say, oh, I got a B. We need them to say, okay, what went well and what do I need to improve upon? What are the exact areas which I need to tick a box in next time? So what we do is we start teaching entrepreneurship right down in our junior school. We start in year 3 with those really young children, and we have a Young Pioneers Club that we've just launched. At that, they have activities which are either called creative or curious, and they don't know it, but they're learning this skill of getting feedback and developing. We take it forward in years 6 and 7 with our Young Entrepreneurs Club, and we really get them thinking about designing things, taking feedback from friends. And that's such a great skill because the friend has to be able to be critical. Sometimes we want to just say the nice thing, but there's an appropriate way of giving feedback, and that's just really valuable too. So they give feedback, the partner then develops the product and so on and so forth. And we see this trickle into their everyday life. This ability to receive feedback, to give feedback, and to act upon it in order to improve. This is a life-changing skill, and we really see it grow through the school. The picture you see there is a team of girls who were in year 11 last year. They called themselves the Citrus Way. They developed some citrus-based cleaning products. They decided to enter an entrepreneurial competition. It was a national competition, a really big one in the UK called the Peter Jones Tycoon Competition, and they became the national winners. They're now selling their products still in the UK and in the US. And I'm so delighted that this group of 16-year-old young people from Badminton have had the tenacity to do that. And that is life-changing for them. They will leave school already having, won great accolades, spoke on global platforms, and having the knowledge to how to set up a company and deliver a product and all that takes. So these types of skills, they are great obviously in an entrepreneurship sense, but they give them intrinsic skills in seeking feedback, which we all need to develop. Resilience. Well, who doesn't need, jumping ahead of myself, adaptation. Adaptation. So yes, the world changed in the last year and we all had to adapt. Adaptation is a fantastic skill. We can't be stuck in our ways. It comes a bit alongside the iteration and the feedback, of course, but being personally able to adapt is so key. And again, we start this really low down in the school and we build and build and build through our programme. We have 8 pastoral pillars that run through the school from age 3 to 18, and all the time we're building up these skills. And adaptation is just one of them. In our junior school, and it runs through into our senior school, but we teach about character strengths. What are our own character strengths, and can we recognise other people's character strengths? In doing that, we know what tools we've got to fall back on when we need to adapt. We take it forward in the senior school to a more formal sort of learning sense through our work on metacognition. Metacognition is all about understanding learning processes and understanding one's own learning processes through reflection so that you can learn better. This is fantastic because the young people then know what they want to choose in terms of how to study so they can get the best outcomes. We've learned a lot from remote learning. The young people became really resilient, independent learners in a way that they never had in school before. Now, that's not something that we should throw away now that we're back in school. And so we're really working to take on from our metacognition, work with self-directed learning. And what that means is enabling different study pathways through the same topic for the student to be able to choose the best pathway for themselves. In order to choose the best pathway, they have to be really metacognitive, they have to know themselves and have reflected. And of course, the teachers have to design really clever pathways and frameworks to support them. It's not the teachers saying, go away and do this yourself, as self-directed learning might seem. It's in fact really carefully constructed teacher frameworks, which students then choose how to follow in order to get best outcomes. So what we're doing here at Badminton is we're taking learning from the pandemic time, translating it into our future so that we too are adapting and modelling good practice to our young. Resilience, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is key. Obviously, this is a very sporty picture here, but resilience doesn't just mean ability to keep going in the tough times when the race gets hard or the match gets tough. It's in our academic work too. And learning at Badminton, as I've mentioned several times now, is not just in the classroom, it's really everywhere. It's in the sports teams, it's in the extracurricular clubs, it's in the boarding house. You have to be resilient. And I think boarding is a great environment in order to practice that resilience, because at the end of the day, you can't leave school behind and just go home and forget about it. You're in the same group of people facing the same dynamic. So we teach them to be resilient in so many ways, be it that they've got to face up to issues, maybe in friendship groups. We give them a framework for negotiation on how to resolve it. They've got to be resilient when the mark comes back that they didn't want. They've got to use that iteration and adaptation to step on, step up, and deliver better next time. It sounds like we're quite tough and hard at Badminton, but we're not. The teachers are there all the time. They meet their tutor every day. They see their house mistress every evening. And all the time, even though we're encouraging them to be really independent learners, we are there. We are there in the background, ready to step in. And alongside the eyes-on observations that we make in the classrooms, in the activities in the boarding house, we also have several databases which teachers, tutors, house staff feed into, and which tutors and house mistresses check every day to see if there's any patterns emerging. Are there late preps in several subjects? Were they not answering questions in a couple of classes today? That way we can quickly pick up a pattern before it becomes an issue, and the tutor or house mistress can chat to that young person and say, hey, we're noticing you've stepped away from this, or you're a bit behind on this. What can we do to help? And if needs be, we will step in and we'll put a bigger framework around them, a more supportive framework, until they find their feet again and are ready to continue. But the key thing for us is we need to be doing a step away whenever we can, because we want these young people to be independently resilient. There is no point in coming to Badminton, getting fantastic grades, and then not being able to transition to university or music conservatoire or apprenticeship if they're just going to collapse because they don't have someone guiding them. Resilience is so important for their next steps, and we're committed to making sure that they are confidently resilient. Of course, economic awareness is key. Just this week, I saw the young people in our junior school, just age 4 and 5, sorting their money to see if they could afford an ice cream from the shop that was visiting school that day. And that's so important, understanding of money at a basic level. But in the senior school this week as well, I've seen really exciting things happen. We have developed a group of young people who are so keen in following stocks and shares. We're trying to work out how we can enable our own stocks and shares club, that they can have a small fund in which to actually invest and follow. And that's been pupil driven. They said, this is really exciting stuff. We love following it. We love understanding it. What can we do more? And their ambitious aim is that that money then, if any is generated from their judicious investment, would be put into our bursary fund to support other young people in the school. And you know, that just speaks volumes about how practically we do things at Badminton. We're a real hands-on type of school. Of course, We have all sorts of economic awareness lectures, personal financial planning lectures. That forms part of our personal, social and cultural education. But it's these really practical moments that I think bring it to life for the young people, and we're committed to that. Teamwork, as I think we've mentioned several times, can't be underestimated. And teamwork can take many guises. Of course, it happens in the classroom. Sometimes the teachers will set projects which have to be worked on as a team. Sometimes the young people choose their own teams. Sometimes they're directed by us. But either way, they have so many skills to fall back on in order to make the best of a team situation. We've taught them about their character strengths and about recognizing other people's so that they can allocate roles really effectively. We've taught them about negotiations, resilience, iteration, all the things that I've mentioned previously, which means as a team, they can work well. And of course, teamwork is a great place to try out their communication skills. This is so important, we think, for moving forward. It's so rare that anyone acts as an island, acts as an individual. We have to work in teams. If we think of our own workspace, I love being head of Badminton School, but I couldn't do it without my fantastic senior leadership team and of course all of the other teams that surround them. It is about the team. We often think of great icons who make the difference. We might think of Steve Jobs and Apple, but dig a little further, we'll see there was a whole team of people making the magic happen. Teamwork is so vital, and we need young people to understand that, no matter how fantastic they are as individuals. And sometimes that's quite hard for them, particularly if they are real experts, if they're children who really thrive and fly academically. They can get on, they can do things on their own, they're self-sufficient. But teamwork is a skill that we're committed to embedding in all our young people, because they will need to fall back on it at some stage. So we have many practical manifestations, of course, the sports field, of course, Duke of Edinburgh's challenge, of course, when they have to do a play and interact with one another and rely on one another, and many other small things. You know, we have competitive houses in our school, as many of our UK independent schools do. So working together for house challenges, all these types of things, it's really important. Being technologically literate is just as key. You might sort of laugh and say, why is she even mentioning that? Young people, they're all over technology. And yes, they are. Quite often we'll say to them, what would you do with this app? What would you do with this device? Because they have just an intuitive, native sort of approach to it, because technology has been such an integral part of their life that perhaps it wasn't in mine when I was young. So yes, they are great, but are they technologically literate in a way we want them to be? Not always. They use it in a very social way. They use it with their peer group, with their friends, and that's not always appropriate in a learning context or in a professional context. So actually, one real blessing of the pandemic in terms of remote learning is we were able to really reinforce our protocols for how to use different platforms appropriately when you're interacting with staff or when you're acting in a classroom forum. This is absolutely key. So we want them to be confident professionally and academically on these platforms. And that's something that we, again, will take forward as we come back to the classrooms at Badminton, which has been absolutely great to have the young people in the school again. Of course, we're trying to rebuild and refocus many of those face-to-face communication skills, but we will not neglect the fantastic developments that the staff and pupils alike have innovated upon during the pandemic times. So I'm conscious we need to leave some time for questions, so I will just conclude. What we're aiming for at Badminton, for these citizens of 2030 and beyond, is that they leave us curious, confident and courteous so that they can thrive. And I think that's really key. A happy byproduct, as I said, is inevitably some great academic outcomes and fantastic next steps to the university or career of their choice. But it is those things, curious, confident and courteous, that sort of sit on top of all the life skills we've talked about and will take them forward in their future career. I hope I've given you a window on how we think about preparing citizens of the future at Badminton. I hope it's been helpful, and over to you for questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Always a pleasure to hear you speak. We do have some questions for you, and we have one from a parent from China. And the question is, what kind of student is Badminton looking for I'm considering girls' school and look for a school that fits my daughter's personality. She's very academic and a bit shy.
That is such a good question. I think, you know, sometimes when people hear what we're like at badminton, we talk about being curious and confident. They say, well, goodness me, you know, will my daughter who's a bit shy not fit in at badminton then? But let me tell you, we've got a whole range of students. You don't have to be loud and outgoing to thrive. One of the blessings of being a small community is that we get to know every individual really well. All that we ask for is that the pupils are really wanting to be curious about their learning. What we're not looking for is a pupil that just wants to say, tell me the answer that I need to rote learn so that I can skip through the exams at the end of the year. That doesn't work here, because at badminton, pupil to pupil, pupil to teacher, we're always having conversations. Now, those can be quiet one-to-one conversations with the less outgoing individuals, or they can be bigger group conversations with the more outgoing. We don't mind as long as people are curious and want to learn in a kind of exploring way. So shy doesn't matter, just curiosity does, I would say. And oh my goodness, if you could visit the school today, there are so many different types of girls. We've got sporty girls, musical girls, academic girls. And one of the best things about it is they really respect one another's differences. I think it is being this small environment. I mean, most year groups have around 60 pupils. So in that context, they're all known to one another. And so quite often when I'm walking through the school, they'll say to me, oh, Mrs. Tier, have you heard what Jasmine's done this week? She's got selected for the National Youth Theatre. And I'll be like, oh, Jasmine, why didn't you tell me? And she'll be out, didn't want to blow my own trumpet sort of thing. But the others are so proud of their friend's achievement, even though they might not be dramatic, they might be sporty or academic, but they love one another achieving, and they promote one another and encourage each other to follow their own aims, and also to try out things that they're interested in. It's quite nice. Sometimes I'll say, oh, I didn't know you're interested in this. And they'll say, well, you know, my friend does it and she's encouraged me to come, and actually I'm quite enjoying it. So I think the small environment here really brings out the best in everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that answer. I do hope that's reassuring to our parents to ask that question. Something else we've been asked, and obviously someone's been paying very close attention. What does value added mean? Now, great thing to talk about, because well, I'll leave it to you, of course, but I think it's something people I think people should understand better.
Yes, definitely. So value added is such an important concept. It's about, does the school actually make a difference to that individual child? And of course, that's what we're all hoping to do in education. So when pupils join badminton, they undertake an online electronic test, which is run by a company in the UK, which has been running it for, I think, over 20 years. So they've got a massive data bank of facts. And what it does is it sort of does adaptive reasoning tests. So if the child is absolutely flying on the test, the computer makes the program harder and harder. It pushes them to the limits of their understanding in verbal, non-verbal, mathematical, all the different types of reasoning. We then have that data for the duration of time they're at school. And what it does is it goes into this national database, and it's not shared with anyone outside badminton. It's all data protected. So don't worry about your child's data sort of being shared with everyone in England. It's all carefully conducted, so that then we know a child with that profile would usually go on in most UK schools, get certain grades at GCSE and A level. And it tells us what grades they get if they were in a normal UK school, a state school, or if they were in an independent school. It has data from both sets. When that child stays at badminton and then gets on to GCSE, we can say, oh, how did we do? Did they get the expected grade or did they get above it? And usually at badminton, they get 1 grade above what was expected in most subjects. Of course, there's slight variations from year to year. And because we're a small school with a small sample size, of course, you have to play a bit of caution with statistics when you're working on that level. But this is how we benchmark how we're doing. If we're really adding, you know, positive things, or if the child had a book and could have got there on their own in any school sort of thing. But we're proud that our stats show that we are adding value in that way, given that data. And we test, I think I saw a question pop about what year does that happen? We test the child in any year of entry. It can be done in any year. The database can be cross-referenced for any year group. Most common year groups are year 7, year 9 and year 12. But if they arrived in another year group, we'd find an opportunity to benchmark accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're starting to have a little flurry of questions here. I will try to move quickly. So the question from Beijing parent: do you think COVID will slow down the process of the world being more international and diverse? So, which affects the demand for international talent and education. So, I think, well, perhaps the first part of that: do you think COVID might slow down the process of the world being more international and diverse?
I think it's a real challenge to know the answer, because there've been, every time we think we're making progress, we seem to find a new variant or another step and twist and turn in the problem. I think in many ways it's seen us actually, or the playing field really leveled. We've all been faced with the same challenges. We've all had to learn from one another, and we've all got better at working remotely and sharing IP in different ways. So I think it might be a slightly different format, but I'm hoping that we recognise that actually, as in every case, we're stronger together and we should continue to work together. I mean, certainly Badminton's approach is, our international families are just as valued by us. We want to continue to work internationally, and we're absolutely committed to it. If it means we have to be online talking to more families, so be it. As soon as we can travel, we will travel. We're not planning on holding back. And I think if anything, the research around how to get through COVID has seen that actually, again, together we're better. We can learn from each other. If we go off in our silos, we slow the world down. So I'm praying the world takes the view that badminton has, is that international is just as important and we must persevere.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just quickly, once again, I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer everybody's questions, so I'll just give you just one very quick one. Any tips to encourage children's curiosity?
Absolutely. I think set them a challenge and give them the opportunity to fail in it. It can be a challenge just as simple as at home, here's a recipe, follow it. If it goes wrong, why did it go wrong? Which step did it go wrong? What did you have difficulty with? It doesn't always have to be a maths challenge or read a massive English book. You can find ways in everyday life to encourage young people that might think learning's not for them. Find their interest and set them a challenge in it. Because that's how you'll get the tenacity. Because if they're genuinely interested in it, if they really want to cook that cake, if they want the chocolate cake for tea, they'll find a way to follow the recipe. If they want to fundraise enough money so that they can go on a school trip, set them the challenge. Show them how to set up a spreadsheet. What different tasks can you do? How much money will they bring in? How many times you have to do it till you get to your goal? There's different ways. Don't always make it sort of from a book, from an online screen. Try and make it a real lived experience, and you'll capture their imagination, I hope.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think we've just got 1 minute, so very quickly, will the school provide assistance for students to apply to Oxbridge?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Every type of university, we start all the way down in year 9, talking about, careers, next step process. We've got a team in school. We have a specialist higher education and professional guidance advisor. We have a whole Oxbridge pathway, be it through our High Flyers programme, which provides stretch and challenge to make sure they're getting a real portfolio of evidence. We've got work experience programmes, we've got internships. And then, of course, through those final stages, we've got interview preparation, the preparation for the exams they need to sit, because many courses have those extra exams. It's all here. We have links with senior tutors and ex-senior tutors at various colleges who come in, talk to the girls, mentor them. Yeah, absolutely. Leave it to us. But we also keep parents informed so they're reassured through the whole thing too.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us on Saturday morning. Pleasure always to hear you speak. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Right. Well, thank you to Beth Chair from Badminton. Our final speaker today is Matthew Godfrey, Deputy Head at Caterham School. Matthew teaches English at Caterham and is also Deputy Head with responsibility for all admissions. His 3 children, 1 daughter and 2 sons, are all currently studying at Caterham. Over the past 20 years, Matthew has taught in 3 of the UK's top independent schools. He was a boarding housemaster at Brighton College for 6 years before moving on to Caterham, where he's been in post for 7 years. Matthew started his career working for a global management consultancy, but he describes his decision to train as a teacher as one of the best decisions I ever made. Matthew will be telling us about managing the transition to UK boarding schools. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Raf, and good morning to everyone from, well, good day, I should say, from the UK. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. It's my pleasure to talk to you today. I'm speaking to you from Surrey, where Caterham School is located. Here in the UK, we are very pleased because it seems summer has begun. The sun is out, it's quite warm, and although we've been suffering like everyone with COVID, that situation seems to be improving as well. Anyway, so as the title slide shows here, the focus of my talk is going to be on managing the transition to a UK boarding school, with a particular angle, of course, at families like you who live abroad, but who are thinking of sending their children to the UK. Now, Caterham School has a long and proud tradition of recruiting boys and girls from overseas countries to our school. And so we have a long history of making sure that happens as smoothly as possible. I'm going to begin by just telling you a little bit about our school, and then we'll talk more specifically about transition into any UK boarding school. So next slide, please. This picture shows the location of Caterham School. The photograph shows you the big green space that we have here, over 200 acres of land, but quite close to London. As you can see from the map, Caterham School is located just on the outside of London, and we say we have the best of both worlds. We have lots of space, lots of green, fresh air on a very safe campus, but with the convenience of being close to airports and also close to London, but also close to the countryside. By the way, I'm mindful that many families like yours who are thinking of coming to the UK would have visited our school by now, but because of COVID, you cannot do so. We very much hope we'll be able to welcome you here to Caterham in due course. Next slide, please. I mentioned our campus, and I think this actually has relevance to the title of my talk, Transitioning into School. I think it's very important for you as parents and the students to be thinking, what kind of school do I want to go to? And one of the considerations will be, you know, should it be in the middle of a town, or should it be in the countryside? Should it be a campus school, or should it be one that is sort of based all over a town or a village? So because then you will feel more confident coming into that school. So Caterham School is a campus-based school. So this picture here shows the nature of our campus, which is located in our own valley, just beside Caterham village. It's about a 10-minute walk into the village, but the school is on one principal site. And so while it is spacious, it is also compact, and there aren't any great journeys or walks that pupils have to take. And it is also very safe and secure because of where it is located. So I think, you know, different schools suit different people. And if your child or your son or your daughter is the kind of person who would prefer to be in a more a busy, more built up area, that is one thing. Maybe they're better suited to be on a campus style school like ours. It's different things will appeal to different people. Next slide, please. Now, I was just listening to Mrs. Tier talking about added value. And I think that is worth thinking. When thinking, how will my son or daughter transition into a senior school? You might want to ask the school, well, how much is my child going to have value added to them? Okay, because that says something about the nature of the school. So at Caterham School, we are very proud that, as it says on this slide, we're one of the top schools for adding value. Now, what that means is a pupil who arrives in Caterham School will find a school which is pushing them and challenging them to be the best that they can be, so that they will do better than expected. It's perhaps more useful than just looking at A-level and GCSE results, because it kind of shows the spirit of the school. and I'm going to talk more about that later. But you might be wanting to find a school where your sons and daughters are going to be challenged academically and brought up higher than they might be otherwise. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit now about how the admissions process of different schools will help the transition process. I understand absolutely, particularly as families who are located overseas, it's quite hard to understand the process of joining a new school in a new country. And certainly Caterham, and I know all the other schools that have been represented at this event, want to be as helpful and as cooperative as they can be. But I think a good thing to be asking at this stage is, what exactly is involved in joining the school? How will I be helped? How will my son and daughter be helped as they go through the admissions process? Now, the first thing is you are very fortunate to be linked with BE Education, because BE know these schools. BE will know and understand the admissions process, and they will know what your son or daughter needs to do to prepare. So that is firstly very important. And actually we ask all of our pupils to join our school through BE, because I think they do a very good job in advising and consulting. Now, I want to mention a few other things. In terms of managing the transition, you need to find out, is the school right for your child? Okay, so for example, at Caterham, it is a very suitable school for lots of children. We're very popular, but BE Education, firstly, will have experience in telling you how competitive it is to get into our school. And if the school is overly competitive, it may not be the right school. You need to find a school which is well fitting to your child's abilities, or at least their ability at the age they are now. So that's one thing to bear in mind. The second thing is how open, how helpful will the school be when you have applied to the school? So I will give you some examples of what we do, and I know other schools do it as well, but I think it is helpful for the transition process. So for example, as soon as a pupil has gone through our process of admissions, they have, first thing we do is we interview every child. Because of COVID, we are having to do that largely virtually at the moment. So we interview the child and they do an exam in order to be considered as a candidate for Caterham School. When they have had their interview and when they have had the exam, if we make them an offer, then before you even have to accept the offer, we will offer an individual conversation with someone like me, a deputy head or the headmaster or a senior person in the school will reach out and have an individual conversation with you. And just to talk to you more about the school, to answer any questions you may have, because your sons and daughters and you as parents will have lots of individual questions to ask. And we try our best to answer those before you even apply. But the truth is, when you have received an offer to a school, particularly if you've received more than one offer, then I think it is our duty as a school to talk about those things with you. So, you may be wondering how many people will be in the boarding house. How much academic preparation does my son have to do? How are you going to help him settle in when he's in the school? Or, she's really keen on swimming. How can you help me do that? So the point of that phone call or that Teams meeting or Zoom meeting is really to have an in-depth, at least 1 hour conversation with you to talk about exactly what the school can do for your child. And we will do that before you even accept an offer to join our school. I know that other schools will provide that as well if you want it. And the second thing I wanted to mention at this stage, which is part of our admissions process, is once you have decided to join the school, that will probably be in January, but your child is not coming to the school till September. So what we always do is we will pair you with an ambassador family. So this is a family whose child is already in our school and who live reasonably close to you. So that can be really helpful. It's just like a kind of friend for you who already knows Caterham School and who will tell you anything you want to know about us and their experience as parents in the school. And we will also pair their child with your child so that your child will know at least one person well before they actually join the school. So I've mentioned two things that you might want to ask if, when you're considering a school, whether they will do the same. One is have an individual conversation before you decide on accepting an offer. And secondly, being paired with an ambassador family so that you can get to know a family before you actually join the school. Now, these two things we have noticed in the last year or two during COVID have been really very helpful for parents who are joining our school, particularly as they haven't been able to join, they haven't been able to visit the school. So, but we were doing these things already and we're going to continue doing them even after COVID has gone. So I think that's important, and certainly it will help you as parents and your children with the admissions process and the transition into the senior school. Thank you. Could we have the next slide, please? Now, this picture here shows Mrs. Quinton. So those of you with daughters who are considering applying to our school, you will be in the care of Mrs. Quinton. She is the boarding house mistress for all the girls at Caterham School. She runs the boarding house brilliantly and is a much loved person. And she is deeply fond of all of her girls in her boarding house. Now, in terms of transitioning and getting used to settling into the school, I wanted to mention that, as I said, you'll get an offer to the school in January, but you won't come till September. So round about March or April, Mrs. Quinton for the girls and the boys' house masters will meet all of the incoming pupils virtually, via Zoom probably, at least once, normally twice, before they actually arrive in the UK. And this is a very good thing to do. It means that your son, your daughter, has built up a personal relationship with their house parent before they even join the school. A second thing that will happen is on the second phone call that the house parent makes, they will introduce your son and your daughter to some other people in the boarding house, so that, you know, again, any questions can be answered, or if your son or daughter just wants to see what some of the other boarders are like, then he or she will be able to do that as well. So this is, again, all part of the admissions process, but it's our way of trying to make the journey into Caterham School as comfortable as possible. And it is often the case that boys and girls who are joining our school want to ask academic questions, how best to prepare. And so we will also introduce them to some of the teachers virtually before they arrive at the school as well. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the things you can see on this slide that are pretty standard in most boarding schools. So we want to create a home environment. We want to provide pastoral care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are always lots of staff on hand to help and support your child. So these are just some of the things which are, of course, in place in Caterham, but are in place in all the boarding schools that have been part of this event today. Now, but what I want to say is, in order to transition successfully into a boarding school, of course, you want to be asking two questions. One is, you know, what will I be doing when I arrive in the school? What activities are there? Of course, you want to know that. And you want to be reassured that when your child arrives in the school, he or she will be busy enough, not too busy, but busy enough to be happy and to be stimulated. Okay, so the first thing you want to be asking is, you know, is there going to be enough for them to do when they're not in academic lessons. And the second thing, perhaps the more important thing, is your sons and your daughters need to be asking, what can I bring to the boarding house? What can I bring to the boarding house? Like, for example, if your son really enjoys sport, then, you know, he can come to the boarding house saying, look, I really want to get involved in sport. If your daughter is very musical, then clearly they want to be bringing those talents here as well. It's about how they're thinking. We want pupils to come to our school ready to contribute. And if they have that mindset, that they will make a contribution. And one of the reasons we have selected them to come to our school is because they're going to make a positive contribution to the boarding house. So if you're asking those two questions, yes, what is there for me, but also what can I bring into the school, then I think the transition into the school will be as smooth as it can be. Next slide, please. Okay, achieving full potential. Now, I just wanted to say a few things about this. Clearly, at Caterham and all the other schools, we want your children to be happy and comfortable and feel at ease in their environment, because if they are, then they're going to be fulfilling their true potential. I think what I would say here is that, you know, one thing that people worry about is that they're coming from a different country, a different culture over to the UK. So I think you should perhaps be asking any school you're thinking of, well, how will that school, you know, help me integrate into this new community? Okay, so with Caterham, we are very pleased that we have lots of different nationalities, lots of different cultures represented in our boarding community. And we have a day community as well, which is obviously almost entirely British in makeup. So we have, when your child starts at the school, they will spend lots of time in extracurricular activities outside the classroom, in our woodland, in the social spaces in the school, just spending time with these people, both from their own nationalities, but also from the other nationalities in the school. And so we deliberately put a social program in place straight away, whereby the pupils all get to know each other. And on the very first Friday, virtually the first day your child is here, we will have no lessons during the day. The focus of that day, which we call Enrichment Day, is just getting out of the classroom, spending time talking to each other and doing activities such as going into the woodland, going for a walk, doing an assault course that we've built on our own campus, going and doing other activities such as music and drama. Even if you don't like those things, we just have a go. The point of Enrichment Day is to help the children get to know each other and to realize that even though we celebrate difference, actually there aren't so many differences after all. And this is a really good way to integrate into the school. Next slide, please. Now, your child will have specific interests, okay? So, I mean, the reason I put this slide up here is because we have quite a lot of pupils at Caterham who are interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I think you need to think to yourself, well, what is my child's interest? Are they interested in those kind of subjects, or are they more interested in art or the music or whatever else it might be? Because you want to know that the school is going to be able to encourage your child's interests. So this is my favorite society at Caterham School. The car you see in the picture there is called a Caterham car. It is quite a well-known sports car in the UK. And the students you see in the picture are actually building the Caterham car, because every year we have a bunch of students who learn how to make a car, and they actually build a Caterham car in a building here on Caterham School. So it's just one example of how Caterham really tries to cater for our pupils' individual interests. So you need to firstly decide what is your child's interest, and then ask yourself, is the child going to a school which will have some kind of activities that are going to appeal and interest them? Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, this is just a picture of some of our students in our woodland. As I told you, we are blessed with a lot of woodland and a lot of space here at Caterham. But actually, the point I'm going to make here is an important one for transition. And the slides is really just an illustration. It's about talking to their peers, about the level of English your children have. Now, as it happens, Caterham is a very popular and selective school. So one of the things we encourage is applications from students whose level of spoken and written English is already of a very good standard. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be fairly good. One thing I would advise you, whatever school you are going to, is perhaps in the last 6 months before you come to the UK, your sons and daughters should be focusing on their spoken English. Of course, schools like Caterham and others will support the learning of English, but I think it probably is important to realise that if your child is coming to a UK school, even though help will be provided, the level of English is important. Now, it's particularly important if your child is joining a school in year 10. Now, I'm an English teacher, and we get started on teaching English GCSE at the beginning of year 10. So it's more important then that their written and spoken English is pretty good from day one. Now, one thing I want to mention is that when we offer a place to a pupil to join our school, as I say, there's normally 6 months before they join. And so we will actually offer EAL, that's English as an Additional Language tuition, for any pupil who has won a place in our school but still wants to improve their English, okay? And this is something that is paid for in addition, but it is nonetheless useful. So it is something you might want to consider, that if your child is going to a school, firstly, they should work on their English, and maybe their school, like Caterham School, will actually offer that as a service. We do it as an online tuition service. So that's just something to bear in mind. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I really admire pupils, like your sons and daughters, who are going to come to our school. It shows some courage to leave their own country and come over here. And this next slide is about getting children to learn to learn. Now, it's about independence. In my experience, pupils who win a place at Caterham School are quite good at this already, because they've taken the decision to come over and be independent and come away from home. But even so, at Caterham, we are going to make sure that they have those skills, make sure that they learn how to learn, because they are not going to have teachers with them every day of their lives at university. So we are going to prepare them to be independent people. And again, I think this is something you need to talk to about with your sons and daughters before they join the school, is how independent are they? Are they ready when they come to secondary school in the UK to be a little bit more independent, to take some initiative and to take some time to learn themselves with the support, of course, of their teachers? Next slide, please. One of the ways we do this at Caterham School is with a study buddy program. A lot of parents worry, who's going to look after my child when they come into a boarding school? And I know other schools do this, but one thing that will happen at Caterham is that when your son or daughter joins the school, we will buddy them up with an older boy or girl. And that older boy and girl, their job twice a week is to sit down with your son or your daughter and just to ask how they're getting on. Are you okay? Have you got enough work to be doing? Have you got too much work to be doing? Do you need any help with your maths? Do you need any help with your English? Really just to provide a support of that kind. Of course, we have other members of staff who are always here to help, but it's quite nice for students, teenagers, when they join our school to know that they will build a relationship with an older pupil who already knows, how to achieve well in our school. So this is quite a well-known program now at Caterham. It's called the Study Buddy Scheme. I've already mentioned the Ambassador program, which is when we match your child with another family and another pupil before they join our school. Next slide, please. Of course, it is the case that Caterham is quite well known for the digital technology we use in class. We've been doing this for many years. It's been particularly effective, of course, during COVID, when some of our pupils have had to learn remotely. I thought I would mention it now under the topic of transitioning into senior school, because now, before children join our school, they can experience Caterham School's teaching and some of our resources digitally. So again, after you have won a place in our school, Caterham will reach out to your children virtually. There will be no compulsion to do so. They don't need to. They will be busy, I'm sure, in their own schools before they come to the UK. But we nonetheless will allow them in the summer term some experience of popping in to our lessons virtually. This is a good thing to do because it just gets them used to the style of learning and the style of teaching here. It's just one example of how we use technology in Caterham School to help and support our pupils. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this slide is simply showing an important part of what we do, which is not just giving our children knowledge so that they can pass exams. It's developing them as whole people who are problem solvers with initiative and who will be able to cope in the adult world when they need to show individual aptitude and skills and problem solving. That is very much what our school is about. Next slide, please. So I think you should also be asking schools, if your child is very academic and is likely to want to go to a top university, you should be asking the school, well, what is the school's success rate in getting children into top universities? Now, this slide here shows you the last 5 years at Caterham School, where our international pupils have managed to get places at Oxford and Cambridge University. And of course, they're not the only two universities, there are many others, but I wanted to show you the success we have had and many other schools have in getting your sons and daughters into top schools, into top universities. And we can only do this, firstly, if your children come with the right attitude and the right aptitude, but we can also only do it with the help and cooperation of our teachers here at Caterham School. And so, you need to ask, what is the program in place to help my son, to help my daughter reach these kind of courses? Next slide, please. Really just the last few slides. We want, as you do, our students, our children to leave our school confident and feeling happy and ready for the next challenge ahead. Next slide, please. But we want to do this in a kind and humane way. And we know from our experience that all those children who have come through our school and gone on to universities, gone on to successful careers, they look back at their time with us as having happy memories. And often it's the things that happen outside the classroom that they will remember for the rest of their lives. Okay, and now my final slide, please. It really just goes for me to say thank you for listening to me. I hope it's been helpful to you. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Matthew, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that really, really great insight. Now we are really at the end now, so I just have one very, very quick question for you. We've just we're on a slightly overrun. I think you might have touched on this, but what activities are there for younger boarders at weekends?
Yes, so at the weekends for younger boarders, so we start our boarding in year 9. The first thing that happens is the boarding housemaster puts out a program of activities, and the way it works is the first weekend they're going to be in the boarding house doing activities, using their hands, getting involved in things in the boarding house, getting to know each other. And then every other weekend after that they will go out somewhere. So they'll either go up into London for a museum or a gallery, or they'll go south into the countryside and to explore the outdoors. The idea is that particularly in those early years, we want them to work together either in the boarding house or outside. So no lessons. We don't have any lessons on Saturdays. The focus is on some independent work, homework, but also working together with activities. If they are sporty, there is always sport on Saturdays. All of our matches in lots of different sports happen on Saturdays. So in a nutshell, that's what we get up to at the weekend.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Well, Matthew, I'm afraid we have run out of time there, but thank you so much for your time as always. And to any of our audience, if you have questions that have not been answered that you really would like to know the answers to, please do contact us at BE, and where possible, we will, of course, try and ask our speakers. So, Matthew, thank you very much for your talk and for being our final speaker of the day. And thank you very much as well to our audience. That concludes our event today, and I hope you found it as enlightening and fascinating as I did.